And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore, where we never sit out. We're your hosts, MD and CD. Today, we're going to talk about the ACC Previews Part 2 buzzer beater episode because week one is upon us. And look, we've already sent out our previews. I know SMU is going to be in this, but we've actually on YouTube already sent out our SMU preview video. So we did try to get that out before their Nevada game, which, no spoilers. Just kidding. Obviously, everyone's seen that game. It's, let's just say we had reason to be on the under, the win total. So that was pretty nice there. But yeah, we got 7 teams, right? 8 teams we're going to talk about today, including, I guess, SMU, if y'all haven't already seen that on YouTube. But yeah, it's this is the back half of the ACC. There's some good teams in here, but I would say there's more teams with giant question marks and potentially teams that are maybe not great. So I think this is like the more interesting part of the ACC to talk about because a lot of these teams in here are the keystone teams where like if these teams like win some games that they shouldn't,
Fucking crazy.
like
Madness,
yes,
man.
yes, the
We're
ACC.
talking about a multi-bid league potentially. We're talking about a lot of implications for the ACC come November. Remember, just last year, Virginia Tech, who nobody had winning the ACC, was in the driver's seat to go to the ACC championship game in November. Who knows? Obviously, it didn't quite come to fruition, and maybe that will this year. We'll talk about them at the end of the episode, so stick tuned for that. But by the way, I want to pat ourselves on the back here. We were just about you know, kind of 3 for 3. I mean, it's early and it's not going to overreact in week 0, but we were kind of 3 for 3, or maybe I was on the ACC because we kind of were like, SMU's got some question marks and Florida State's got their question marks too, and Georgia Tech is sneaky. And listen, if anything, that trend's going to continue. You better stick tuned for this video. You better like and subscribe. You guys have been awesome. The comments have been incredible. We love interacting with you guys. We learn so much from you guys. If we miss something, if you agree with something that we say, let us know. We love hearing from you guys. The support has been tremendous. It has been such a fun August to get us in to college football, and we are growing. We are trajecting. We are working our tails off. Like Matthew always says in these videos, these take 100, 150, 200 plus hours to do every conference here. I mean, it is a lot of work, research, editing, filming, put into this. I've been battling surgery. Matthew's doing his thing. We had a power outage yesterday. I was, picking
Yeah.
leaves and trees for 5 hours this morning, crack of dawn, and it's been a wild month of August. But we are here, ACC. We didn't forget about you, and ready to get into it.
Death, taxes, and a Tony Gibson defense that's going to be fiery. But look, when we look at this team, how fiery. And look, last year when we talked about this team, we knew that the defense was going to be borderline elite. We talked about it. We saw the talent. We saw the players. We know the coaching staff. We're like, all right, this is going to be an elite defense. Now, this could metrically grade out to be a pretty good defense because of the schedule, but look, we'll get into it. All right. And look, as usual, we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. Okay. The quarterback room, you introduce Grayson McCall. You lose MJ Morris to Maryland. You lose Brennan Armstrong because that guy's been in college football for 20 billion years. Grayson McCall comes in there. Look, Grayson McCall, say what you will about a guy transitioning from, G5 to P4 here, but Grayson McCall in 2021, that season was the second highest passer efficiency rating in a single season by any quarterback ever. And it was just broken this season by Jaden Daniels, who won the Heisman Trophy. Other
And
other
was
names on
selected
this
third
list, by the
overall.
way, other names on this list with Grayson McCall. Jaden Daniels, of course, Mac Jones, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Zach Wilson. I mean, like,
First round
my
picks, all first round picks.
all first round picks. Now, of
Where's
course,
my Grayson Mahal hype? Where's it? Where's his hype?
where's his hype? Uh, I know there was a little bit of downgrade at Coastal Carolina because one, you lose Jamie Chadwell over to Liberty, and two, Grayson McCall was battling injuries, which left the door open for guys like Ethan Vasco to play meaningful
We
minutes, who we
love.
love on this show. Ethan Vasco is a dog. But how are we feeling about this quarterback room? Obviously Grayson McCall, but in general.
Listen, last year was kind of underwhelming to say the least. Both quarterbacks. Listen, MJ Morris didn't even win the job at Maryland. Okay. And he came in and he was significantly better than Armstrong at times. Obviously, Armstrong finished strong after he got benched, and then Morris decided to sit out. I think this will be a fresh sight to get, I don't want to call it just a grown up, but I want to talk about consistency. I think you're going to get with McCall. The dude has played a ton of college football. Yes, it's been at the Sun Belt and the Group of Five level. I don't really care. I love what he can do. I like his legs as well. Last year, I mean, you were a Louisville win at home where you threw for 112 yards, right? You lost that game by 3 points. That was the difference in you going to the ACC title game. And I know this fan base is desperate for that opportunity to play there. And listen, it could be fun offensively. I think Robert and I and Brennan Armstrong had a ton of expectation this year. They did because they were going to reunite and pick up where they left off at Virginia just a couple years ago, and it didn't happen. You struggled early. UConn, I mean, don't you remember that? Notre Dame, you got
Oh,
embarrassed by. I mean, and even
oh,
Virginia in Brennan Armstrong's homecoming game, it struggled in that too. And so obviously, eventually led to the benching there. But I think this weapons group, we'll call it, is pretty interesting.
I
Listen,
love
you
it.
bring in, well, I'm going to start. Well, okay, well, I'll finish off with the quarterback room. Okay, Grayson McCall, obviously that guy. To me, the question here and the hesitancy about, you know, taking their over, because taking their over, right? And you have to rely on potentially quarterback injury. You got to kind of prepare for the worst here. What happens when the floor bottoms out? Can they still get to 9 wins? Their over and win total is obviously 8.5 by that's what we'll be picking at today at the end of the show. Stick tuned for that. But CJ Bailey is probably that guy. Listen, I know they like his future. Absolutely. What's not to like? Is he ready in 2024 to give you meaningful snaps if he has to? If McCall goes down and battles injuries like he did last year? I don't quite see it. Jordan Waters, though, moving to the running back room, coming over from Duke. Now, listen, he was the second best running back on that Duke team. That is
Correct.
no slight to Jordan Waters because we love
And
Jordan
people are gonna think
Moore.
we're crazy. People are gonna think we're crazy saying that.
We love Moore.
Just
Wait,
watch
no.
Jacquez Moore film. Just do
Jack was
it.
Moore. Thank
Do
you.
yourself a favor.
But listen, I think they're building some depth quietly in that room. Last year it was awful. It was Brennan Armstrong was your leading rusher for most of those games. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Kendrick Raphael was not very good. But listen, Hollywood Smothers, he's kind of shown out in camp. Jaden Scott, another kid. I think they like to the future there. I always like to throw name drop Jordan Poole in there. Just kind of funny. Our guy in the NBA there. But anyways, he's also a solid player with a solid future. But to be honest, the part that you love about this offense, you know, is that wide receiver room and that potential and those young guys in that room growing together. You want to talk
Versus
about that just a
previous
little bit?
years. Versus previous years at NC State, you just have not had dynamic athletes at receiver like you do this year. You really don't.
You go three deep, probably about in terms of like legit ACC game breakers, right? Obviously, everyone knows Kevin Conception. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on him because if you're watching this video, you're probably an NC State fan and you know exactly who he is and how good he can be for you. 71 receptions, 839 yards, 10 touchdowns as a true freshman. Holy cow. Who else is in that room, Matthew?
Well, I would look at Noah Rogers, transfer from Ohio State. This kid, I mean, obviously he's all the talent in the world. I mean, if you're a 4-star, high 4-star coming out to Ohio State to play wide receiver, look, he just got a little homesick, right? He's from Raleigh, guys. Okay, that's why he came back. It's not like yeah, sure, it was tough to get on the field at Ohio State, but this is not a knock at him. Like he was homesick. He wasn't maybe seeing the field as much as he wanted to see. This is a really good talent. This was a fantastic get in the portal for them. I'm in love with Noah Rogers. I cannot wait to see him out here in this fall. I really can't.
Yeah, I don't think this is like a Caleb Burton to Auburn or like a Caleb Brown over to Iowa, where yes, they were highly rated guys and they went over to Auburn and Iowa with pretty high expectations, but obviously, there were some limitations in their game in terms of why they weren't seeing the field at Ohio State. This is not the case. This is not the case. And they parlay that too with a really good recruiting class of weapons. Terrell Anderson, right? Obviously, the cream of the crop, top 100 player, 6'3", 190. They really like him and his future in that room. Also, Tank Boston is there. Um, yeah, holy cow. I mean, it is
They got 5 freshmen in that class.
yeah, they did a great job there. Very, very good job. I'll throw another name out there, Dakari Collins. He's a guy that got better and better as the year went on last year. And the coaches are expecting him to take a step in that starting lineup and to really flash and take some pressure off of Conception and also Rogers, who's, obviously inexperienced. Talent is there, but is it going to be the consistency week in and week out? Dakari Collins, I think, can be that guy and take some pressure and be a reliable target for McCall. Part of the reason Armstrong struggled last year, too, was just like outside of Conception, it was like, Timmons was there, but he was kind of, and then Bradley Rosner, you were expecting a lot from him, but he's gone. Julian Gray, I'm sorry, Grary. I mean, yeah, it wasn't ideal. It really wasn't. But we'll see. We'll see how the young guys come along, in terms of those, fourth, fifth, and sixth guys, where they can revolving door there. Wesley Grimes, I think, is a guy that's pretty interesting as well. How about Justin Jolly in the tight end room coming from
I
UConn?
mean,
Kind of dynamic, isn't that? I mean,
kind of a
and
good
I know it's
athlete.
yeah, I know it's a tight end position. You're like, it doesn't, but sometimes tight ends can be game breakers in college offenses where linebackers, newsflash, not linebackers in college football can be exploited sometimes if they just are in the wrong spots. Now we'll see what happens with the helmet communication. Hopefully that helps that for defenses, but I still think we've seen time and time again tight ends. We saw RJ Maryland. ACC fans, you saw what he did. Now, obviously, Jolly is not RJ Maryland. Okay, all RJ Maryland's a legit all ACC guy, potential All American. Like he is that good. We'll see how Jolly and Juice Vereen, Reed Mitchell, how those guys develop. And I think what's important about that is going to be the offensive line here. Do you feel good about this O line, Matthew?
Well, maybe wasn't as effective as they wanted to be last year. I think they get a lot of those guys back, specifically at those tackle positions. But there is definitely some concern about this offensive line. I think it's a question mark more than I am concerned about it, right? Like this could be an offensive line that could be pretty decent, if Peak and Belton, continue getting better. I thought Peak honestly wasn't that bad at that tackle spot, but that interior, and that left tackle spot with Belton, like to just get better, and I'm uh I'm a proponent, like when you have continuity in general on the offensive line, you're bound to get better in some sort of way.
Yeah.
But we'll see, right? I mean, it's definitely I would say a question mark. It's not a solidified, guaranteed good offensive line. Just gotta wait and see, man. Just gotta wait and see.
Yeah, to me, it's like and obviously it would mean a lot to protect Grayson McCall and let those wide receivers get down the field, push the ball, be explosive in your offense. But let's open some running games, right? We're open some running lanes. Excuse me. That offensive line last year, and now whether it was lack of scheme or the running back talent or whatever it was, it just did not click. I do think those continuity there, I think that can help, especially in the run game in terms of communication, moving, getting that second level, opening holes. I mean, yeah, and behind those guys, I mean, Darren Rivers and Rico Jackson, those are some depth pieces. I think they like, maybe in 2025 and beyond. We'll see. Same with a guy like Val Erickson from Missouri. Um, but I guess, I guess that remains to be seen. Hopefully you don't have to rely upon your depth too much, especially on your old line. But yeah, and to be honest, and listen, Robert and I, we talked him up last year, and a lot of people did. It was an exciting coordinator spot for this team. And it was, again, like I said, it was the difference in them going to the ACC title game and potentially winning it, by the way, because I mean Louisville competed with, obviously a second and third string quarterback for Florida State. Oh, but it'll be tough. To be honest, though, my question marks for this team, my real question marks in terms of hitting the ceiling, is that defense. And I know it's blasphemous. I know it is. And Tony Gibson, I want to apologize. Dave Thorne, I want to apologize because I should not be doubting you. But I kind of want to see. I kind of am wait and see mode. Is that crazy to say?
Yeah, I feel okay about the secondary, but you lose some pretty dang valuable pieces in that front seven. And I guess let's start CD. What are you looking at when you look at this defensive line, right? You get back Van, who has plenty of snaps in college football. You get back Cleveland there. Like in general, though, like are we feeling good about the depth of this defensive line?
I worry about stopping the run, and that's a lot has to do with the guys leaving, and it's going to be more about who's going to plug and play, and let a guy like Red Hibbler, who is really explosive off the edge there, let him get to the quarterback. Obviously, you mentioned him and Vane. who can be productive pass rushers for you. CJ Clark is a good player. He's off to Miami. He's going to stop the run for them very, very well. Brandon Cleveland, what's he going to do? Chaz Wallace, can they stop the run? And then also get moving into that second level there. No Peyton Wilson, no Jalen Scott. This could be a question mark, I think. Now, Caden Fordham, a lot's going to be relied upon him to step up in that role. Who's going to be alongside him? Is it Devin Petty, Jalen Parker? Are those guys ready to play meaningful snaps, especially if they don't have a guy like CJ Clark up front in the middle of them, eating up blocks and letting them run free and diagnose and play fast? I do think, though, I mentioned that green dot, right? The helmet communication with that linebacking core might be a benefit for this team, especially early in the season when you
Yes.
have Tennessee in week 2 and Clemson week 4 on the road and neutral site with Tennessee too. Those are two games that those offenses, especially Tennessee, is going to put you in binds. It's going to put you in binds, and you have to be able to, one, get aligned correctly, and secondly, play fast and physical. And again, not that I'm doubting Tony Gibson. It sounds like I am. I kind of am. But it's more about let me just wait and see. And obviously, this is a developmental program. I trust Dave Doran's been there a while. They're recruiting well. This to me is a group that I could be concerned about. And listen, NC State fans, if I'm absolutely wrong and you feel confident about this group, let us know in the comments who should we be watching out for, because I would love to know and be more educated going into week 1 and week 2 for them. Because I mean, we talking about playoffs. Are we talking about playoffs with NC State? We kind of are. And this could be a group of front seven stopping the run that I think could be the difference in them being there or not. Is that crazy here? But you mentioned that secondary. What
Yeah,
do
I
you
feel
like about
good.
it?
I feel okay because look, snaps in the secondary is always a plus, but I think production, more than just snaps is really effective, when you're trying to project a secondary going into the next season. Aiden White is a phenomenal player. All right, he is a phenomenal corner. He's going to be locked down on that side of the field. Okay. DK Coughlin coming over from Auburn. I think he's a good football player. I think he's had a lot of snaps there, in SEC snaps, Vanderbilt, Auburn, what have you. Jahad Carter is a really interesting one. You're bringing him over as a transfer from Ohio State. The year before, I thought Jahad Carter was going to play meaningful snaps at Ohio State. I really did. He was phenomenal at Syracuse those years previously. So he has plenty of ACC experience. So, like, if you're just looking at his 2023 stats, don't be fooled by Jahad Carter's stats from that season. Jahad Carter is a good football player, right? And he's proven that he can play at a pretty high level in the ACC. And like some of these other pieces, Fitzgerald, Sis, Boykin, Marshall, like I'm okay with a lot of these secondary pieces as well. I think the top end experience and production from some of these guys is going to lead this room. And you know what? This was a very good pass defense last year. It was a good run defense last year. Like metrically, they were fantastic on all accounts. But like you said, I mean, your two linebackers, you're losing like almost 1,600 snaps from your two linebackers. And I think linebacker more than any other position. Now it's not the end all be all, but I think snaps at the linebacker position is more valuable than any other position. And look, your linebackers that you're coming out here with, like Caden Forum played like 400 snaps last year, so that it's not crazy to think that some of these guys, and like Sean Brown, I think,
Is he moving to LB?
I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like with him, but I know that he's a fantastic football player and that they're going to find a way to use him on this team. I really like the secondary, but you're right. I think there are warranted questions about this front seven. But I do look at some of these teams that they're playing, and I'm not seeing a ton of teams that are like going to be super run heavy. I mean, look at Georgia Tech; they will run the ball a lot. North Carolina, they may run the ball a lot as well. But Duke, Stanford, Cal, I guess. I mean, they have a good running back, but are they going to be run heavy? I don't know. Syracuse, we have yet to see. Right? We have yet to see. Wake Forest kind of runs a gimmicky offense. I'm just I'm gonna have to wait and see with that front seven, but I'm you may see these rushing stats look really good at the beginning of the season, but I'm just gonna I'm just gonna warn
Cautious.
folks, yeah, be cautious about the NC State defense down the stretch because now here's the thing. They play some of their good opponents at the beginning of the season. Clemson and Tennessee, you're ripping off those band-aids before week 5 even rolls around. So it's not crazy to think that we might get a pretty good look at what this defense could be, but I'd still caution people down, weeks 13 and 14 going into those weeks, just how good is this defense actually? Let's watch the film. Let's see who's healthy, who's playing well. What does this rotation look like? So I'm interested because Tony Gibson, we've talked about this, is the most underrated, one of the most underrated defensive coordinators in college football because everyone knows Parker over there at Iowa, but I don't think a lot of people know Tony Gibson at NC State and the miracles that he has done over there in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like broken record too, but that's yeah, that cornerback room is scary too. And how about Jahad Carter too? I guess you want to throw him in there at nickel or safety, whatever he's going to play.
Probably nickel, if I'd guess.
Yeah, that's what I think so too. I mean, he was an all ACC caliber player at Syracuse, and he just sat behind couple of really good defensive backs over
Yeah.
at Ohio State. Not his fault. And they're bringing Caleb down. So now he doesn't even have a spot anymore at Ohio State. Yeah, I think it could be a fun group. The problem is, again, not sound like a broken record. It's going to be about stopping the run, earning the right to be playmakers in that second half. I do want to mention a couple guys. Corey Cooley's a guy that's pretty interesting. And then Tamarcus Cooley. Those guys not related, right? Spelled differently.
Coley and
They're
Cooley.
they are good friends, though. Interesting enough. So Cooley to Marcus Cooley. I just said Cooley. You didn't know what I'm talking about. To Marcus Cooley was I liked him as a wide receiver recruit coming out of high school. He moved over to cornerback at Maryland. He ended up transferring the portal over to NC State. Part of the reason is because Corey Cooley, that development, that relationship there. That's kind of a fun story, to be a part of, I guess, in that secondary group. Again, that goes to the cohesion culture that Tony Gibson, has developed there for a while now. And obviously, I mean, Aiden White is incredible, incredible. And so it could be a fun group. And obviously, I do think they were kind of opportunistic last year. They got a good amount of returning turnover production in that secondary, almost 10 interceptions. We'll see, if that continues to uptick because I do think it would be nice, especially if you're breaking in a new quarterback like McCall, to give him some short fields, flip turnovers, sudden change type situations that can be exciting and also, quick play opportunities to really change and break open ball games for you.
Let's head over to the schedule. And with an over-under win total of 8.5, we're looking at Western Carolina, week 1 at home. Tennessee, is that in Charlotte, week 2?
Neutral site, I believe. So, I'll double check.
You can check it as I keep going here. Louisiana Tech, week 3 at home. Clemson on the road, week 4. NIU at home, week 5. Wake Forest at home, week 6. Syracuse at home, week 7. Cal on the road, week 8. I got to go all the way across the country for that one. Then in week 9, you get a bye. So 8 straight games and then a bye. Stanford at home, Duke at home, weeks 10 and 11. Then you get a bye before you end the season on the road in both games, Georgia Tech and North Carolina. Very interesting schedule because I think you're getting some of the bottom tier teams in the ACC, like Duke. I look at Duke and Stanford and Syracuse, not necessarily Syracuse, but like Wake Forest. I look at those as like bottom
Gotta
feeders.
have those. Gotta
Like
have
they
those.
are bottom feeders in the ACC. Those are 3 games you like in the out of conference. I like them in 3 of those games as well. So that's 6 wins. Got to find 3 wins somewhere else between Georgia Tech on the road, UNC on the road, Cal on the road, Clemson on the road, and Tennessee. I'm, ugh, look, I think Georgia Tech's pretty good. I think they're okay. I think that's games on the road. I think UNC could be a problem because UNC, Lord knows, if Connor Harrell wins that job, they're going to want to run the ball, and they might have a really interesting rushing attack with him there at quarterback. I I lean slightly to the under, and this is not a bettable game, not a bettable line for me at all, by the way, at all. Because and I like this offense a lot. I really do. And if Tony Gibson figures out how to get the most out of this defense, like this team is
Like he's
potentially
always
a playoff.
done. Like
He's
he's
always
just
like
about always
like he
done.
always has done, right? Like this team is legitimately in a good position to potentially be a playoff team or compete for an ACC title. Because like the toughest game in the ACC you're looking at is at Clemson, and you know anything can happen. In those games. Now Clemson, you're going to have to stop Phil Maffa. You're going to have to stop that run there and find a way to score on offense. But look, if you beat Clemson week 4, NC State fans, like you're looking at a direct path to an ACC championship appearance. You're looking at a direct path. You know, that is the one that you're circling on your schedule. If you lose to Tennessee, I think so be it. I'm really high on Tennessee. I think they're going to be a really good football team. I wouldn't sweat over it if you lose to Tennessee. I still think you can make the playoffs. I think Clemson week 4 is kind of that keystone game that you really need to circle on your calendars. And look, and if they start the season 2-2, I think they could still salvage the season and have a decent stretch down the end there, and make a really nice bowl game, win maybe 9 games. But I'm gonna slightly lean to the under. I think 8-4 is a realistic possibility here, and which is crazy because I love Robert and I love Tony Gibson. Like, I think Dave Doran has one of the better staffs in the ACC on this team, and it's just not talked about at all. I like you said, I feel weird about this front seven, and when I'm feeling weird about an NC State front seven, that just draws me away a little bit, and some uncertainty. And of course, if Grayson McCall goes down, like, this offense, the wheels could fall off the wagon here, right? If Grayson McCall goes down, like you talked about, Bailey is not ready to go. He's not. He could be. I don't know. He's a true freshman. I would just lean towards him not being ready, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you don't want to have to find out, especially when you've got those late road games. If you have to play them, you don't want to go on the road with it with true freshman quarterback. I want to circle or guess note a couple more games, like you said, or a couple more notes on those games. Yet UNC game, yes, they have, UNC in December has historic or in November has historically been terrible in the SC, right? The past couple of years. But you mentioned that running game. They're replacing a ton of offensive linemen. And maybe
Yeah,
in
that's
week
true.
one and week September and October, they're not going to be, gelling. But who knows come November, with all that experience and that cohesion and being able to take advantage of a front seven if it's not fixed by then. But again, it's
Could be. Who
Tony
knows?
Gibson.
Tony
It probably
Gibson's
could
an
be.
absolute dog.
We saw what Georgia Tech did to a supposedly really good front seven. Now I had my doubts, and I think a couple other people did too. But regardless, that's a really good offensive line and running scheme. They've done that to everybody. Last year too, they shredded the ACC on the ground. To me, I want to turn my attention. Yes, I love the Clemson talk, and that obviously deserves a ton of credit there. The Tennessee game, again, that has no effect on your ACC record. Although, however, it's only a 4.5, 5 point line. It's not a crazy upset if you're going to win that football game. It's also in Charlotte, like you said, over at Panther Stadium. But week 8, right before your bye, that is game 8 of 8 in a row. You have to go across the country and play Jaden Ott in California. And if you are a ACC fan and you do not quite know exactly who Jaden Ott is yet, you will because he is incredible. I do not think it's crazy to call him the best running back in a league with a ton of really good running backs. He could be very, very dangerous, especially at home, going across the country after playing tough games like Tennessee and Clemson and Syracuse as well. I mean, luckily, you don't have to really leave the Carolinas until that day. But again, it's going to be tough. That's not easy. And we'll see how teams adjust. That'll be their first time making that trip across the country. We'll see how teams adjust to that and figure out scheduling and logistics and all that to be sure they're prepared to go on that Saturday. But yeah, with that all being said, I like the over here. 8.5. I see 9, 10 wins on the schedule. 9 more so likely than 10, obviously. But I look at Tennessee, I look at Clemson, and then I'll give you Tennessee's probable loss, right? I'll give it just about a loss or not, a little bit less than that. But then between Clemson and Georgia Tech and California, right? And I guess you could throw UNC in there if they figure things out. You got to win 2 of those games. And I think very, very absolutely could with that coaching staff and the talent on this roster. We'll see how injuries play effect, but obviously you can't really predict that. And they got pretty good depth, I think, most places. Um, other than quarterback, obviously, but we'll see. Regardless, I think this is again a fun year, high expectations for North Carolina State, and as they should be with Dave Doran and the ACC, they are right there. Now the talent quite isn't up to what maybe Clemson or Miami has potentially, but listen, damn near everybody else, you're probably going to be favored against. And I love your coaching staff, like Matthew said. So good things should be happening, I think, for this year. For NC State would love to see them sneak into the playoffs. Love to see them be in the ACC title game where they belong.
Pat Narduzzi, I think, is in a really interesting year because, as great of a coach as I think he is, kind of a negligence, letting Marcus Satterfield just walk out of there right after he coached Kenny Pickett to be a first round quarterback, I think was a little weird, basically kind of forcing him out of there, I guess. And look, this offense is a little scary in the not good way when I look at this offense. Defensively, I thought they were like okay last year, little bend but don't breakish. Let up some explosive plays, of course, but teams tried to run the ball a lot on Pitt because they were up against Pitt a lot, and Pitt kind of underratedly shut down a lot of teams' run games. To be honest, I mean, only allowing like what is it, 3.8 yards per carry. Um, Running the ball, even though teams ran the ball almost 60% of the time against them, 59% of the time they ran against them, which was, I
Well, they're
guess,
probably winning games is unfortunately game script probably
right,
plays a
game
big
script,
part in
but
that.
teams trying to run the ball, but we're not able to, right? So like if
Yeah.
Pitt can somehow flip these game scripts, get themselves in situations where they're playing from maybe not as much behind, but put themselves in situations where they can stop the run, sneak up on some teams that maybe are trying to put games away. But I look at this offense, dude, and last year, I mean, they didn't even get to the red zone, dude. They were last in the country in red zone attempts. 1.8 red zone attempts per game last year.
Not
They didn't
good.
even get the red zone twice per game on average. They didn't even do that, right? They ran 60 plays per game, which was 131st. That is also very terrible. I don't like that's pace. That's not getting the football back. That's just three and out, three and out. Time of possession, they were 129th in the country. Third downs, they were only 28% on third downs, which is good for another bottom five stat in the country. Just abysmal offense to watch last year. And you know what? It's crazy. You thought Jerkovich might have an answer, but he was terrible. And you're gonna walk in this season with and look, maybe you can fill me on this quarterback situation better than I can, but I don't love any of the quarterbacks in this room, especially ones that are going to be getting snaps. What are you seeing about this offense, specifically the quarterback room?
Listen, I think there is reason and I think internal optimism and I think almost justified optimism to be more optimistic this year than last year about what it was. I think there's going to be an improvement. Last year, there has to be. There almost has to be. Because last year was tough. So Nate Yarnell returns and he kind of took over towards the end of last year and he showed promise, right? Obviously, not a crazy mobile kid, but not a great athlete, not a big arm, but he kind of puts the ball in the right spots on the right timing. And in college football, that's kind of all you can ask for your quarterback, especially, you know, if you don't have a dynamic star first round pick on your roster. That's something you absolutely take. He's a redshirt junior. So at least he's been in the program for a while, but it's a new offense. You mentioned Kate Bell coming in, and we'll see how he likes a guy like Eli Holsting. I don't know if they've named the starter yet. By the time you're recording, by the time you're watching this video, right, we'll see what happens. Obviously, it could linger on into the season where you kind of have Kent State and to kind of figure things out, and then we'll see what happens in week 2 and week 3, where you've got some Power 5 opponents in Cincinnati and West Virginia. Going to have to be ready for those games, especially with those defenses, or especially with Cincinnati defense, and to be able to keep up with West Virginia's rushing attack. But listen, I kind of like that running back room. Rodney Hammond and Desmond Reed, not a terrible duo. I think it's a
No,
pretty solid duo, especially, what we've seen this offseason. They seem to be really liking him. And then Derek Davis Jr., right? 4-star kid. I think they like him. He's kind of finally coming into his own there. And then like having a guy like Daniel Carter as your fourth. Listen, that's a good pair and two spares, right? Not bad to have in that running back room.
yeah, no, I certainly agree. And you're bringing a new offensive coordinator too, Cade Bell, and I don't think a ton is known about him. I mean, he was over at Western Carolina for several years with his dad, Kerwin Bell, who's the head coach there at Western Carolina. And them two together kind of turned around that Western Carolina program from being kind of perennial losers those few years before to kind of, being okay and competing in some of those games. So I look, it wasn't a flashy hire, but also Pat Narduzzi is one of those coaches, and I'll throw, Mike Gundy in that. I'll throw Kyle Whittingham in though. Like they don't need the flashy hires. Like they know who coaches ball, right? And they get really good hires from lower levels pretty consistently. So I'm not as worried. I guess about Cade Bell. I'm just worried about the talent I guess you could say, and you talked about in the quarterback room. I'm feeling a little bit better in the running back room, but in the wide receiver room, like besides Mumfield, are you feeling particularly great about the rest of this receiver room?
So you lose Bub Means, but I do think there is
Yeah, it's a big deal.
in yeah, Bub Means a good player, and I think there's optimism. I think so. Mumfield's been a guy that's been there, who's been reliable, right? We've been kind of waiting for him to take over from Jordan Addison. This is year three, I think, without Jordan Addison, which is crazy to see. I think how long it's been since that, a group. Wow, what's it called? What was it fucking called? The Power Six, the New Year's Six bowl game. Jeez
Yes.
Louise. I don't even know what it's called. Is it even called that anymore? I don't even with all the changing. Regardless, so it's been so long since that season. So Kanata Munfield's there. Dejan and Reynolds, I think they kind of like him, is a solid guy. But now you're gonna looking at guys 3, 4, and 5. So Kenny Johnson is a guy in a slot or that they emerged last year. I think that staff likes his potential and what he can be, as a sophomore. This year, he had over 100 yards last year and a touchdown. Raphael Poppy Williams. That's the guy that I want to look at too in the slot. He's kind of been impressing, I think, in camp so far, and he can be a guy reliable for these new quarterbacks breaking in. And obviously, we know the star probably on this offense is Gavin Bartholomew. I mean, he is an actual, I think, a legit star in the ACC in terms of the tight end position, who's got some pretty talented tight ends in this conference. But obviously, he kind of emerges in that room with a guy like Jake Overman, maybe more of a blocker. And I don't know if Malachi Thomas is quite ready yet, but I know there have been potential, and his tape in high school was pretty good as well. We'll see. We'll see. But I think a lot it doesn't matter how good these weapons are or how good they aren't. Anyways, if that offensive line
Is
does
as
not
terrible
take a
as it
step
was.
forward.
Yeah. I mean, it
Listen, I
was
mean,
bad. It was really bad. So how are we feeling about what's the optimism here? Let's give Pitt fans something to cling on to before we head over to the defense.
Branson Taylor. Okay. He's a solid player, right? You return a lot. And so that's also, we talked about the same thing with North Carolina State. We talked about like returning production or returning snaps at the offensive line is not the worst thing in the world. You do see development year over year in that room. And it makes sense, by the way. Guys who go from 19 to 20 to 21 to 22 years old who play football, like they're going to get better. You'd think, you'd
Generally.
hope. Yeah, you'd hope. Um, I guess if you're Bryce Foster at Texas A&M, jeez, man, that's tough. But that was also a Dazio. So coaching matters too. And that thing, BJ Williams is a guy I want to keep my eye on at right guard there potentially. It sounds like he's had a really good offseason. I think true sophomore, a kid that they like a lot, especially the potential. But I think even he's ready to help them in the short term. How about Terrence Moore, a guy that gives you some kind of flexibility there interiorly? We'll see. We'll see. I think Isaiah Montgomery and Caleb Holmes, those are good, solid depth. And we'll see if those guys are ready. So far, Ryan Carreta, he had a good offseason, but again, I don't know if you love a young guy playing uh on your offensive line like that. We'll see. I mean, did I do enough? Is that an optimistic
Well,
enough for?
I'll add one more thing. With injuries, you had some guys play some snaps. Obviously they were also trying out some stuff as well at certain times, but you have a lot of guys that at least have played. So I don't think I think if there's some injuries that happen on this offensive line, you have people that have stepped up and played. So I don't think the wheels are going to fall off the wagon, maybe like it did last year. So I guess that's something that we can kind of cling on to there. Whether they're going to be able to run the ball effectively or not has yet to be seen. Whether or not this offense is actually going to operate the way that they intended to still is yet to be seen. And it is going to largely depend on this offense line. But, and I'm not like super high on it, but I'm not devastated. I'm not like looking at this like, holy cow, this could be a disaster. This is definitely not a top half offensive line in the ACC, right? Not at all. Okay. But like I said, sounds like you got a lot of guys there that have at least played snaps, which, again, if you get in some tight spots, some injuries, like the floor is a little bit higher than I think it was last year, and it kind of fell underneath you uh last year. So I'm still not very optimistic on this offense at all, especially quarterback. And like I said, offensive line and some of those guys in the receiver room, but we'll see. Bub Means was like an absolute stud, but just a wait and see stuff. Heading over the defense, right? Like a unit that has traditionally been pretty frisky for Pitt over there with Pat Narduzzi, and Randy Bates running that 4-3. I mean, how long has Randy Bates been there? Like nearly, probably more than half a decade. So, yeah, I mean, looking at this defensive line, actually, I'll say this about every position for Pitt on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not wowed by a lot of these names. I'm not wowed. Okay.
Well, it's tough because a lot of your wow type players are gone in the portal in the NFL. I mean, we'll start in the defensive line group. Not to cut you off, but Hayes is gone. Green, Brimma, Jules, Okunlola, like a lot of talented guys, a lot of snaps, a lot of potential guys that could be helping you in 2024 are gone. And you try to backfill with the portal, but again, like slim pickings there if you're replacing guys who were going to be starters for you in the portal. I mean, you look at on the edge there, Jimmy Scott coming back. How about Nate Matlick, coming from Kansas State? I think they're relying on him a lot. But again, was he elite for Kansas State? I mean, no one really was, on the defensive line last year for Kansas State. So I guess we'll see new scheme, new conference. Maybe it helps him and his development. Chief Borders, a guy battling for depth. It sucks that a guy like Nate Temple is out for the year, potentially. That's not good. But then you've got a couple guys like David Ojegbe and Sincere Edwards. The staff likes him again, but to me, I'm more wait and see with this group. Interiorly, I think you feel a little bit better because I think you can kind of stop the run. And are you gonna have difference makers there? No, not necessarily. But Nick James, Anthony Johnson, a guy that's really impressed from Youngstown State. Nakeem Johnson moving interiorly, but he can play outside early down, I guess, help you stop the run as well. But you're gonna have guys like Isaiah Neal, like Francis Bruhu, who are going to have to step up and contribute for you. You know, again, it's not something that you really want to have to do, in the ACC, stop and run, especially when we saw Georgia Tech run all over Florida State. Now, you don't play on their schedule, but you're going to see some pretty tough running attacks, I think, or teams that want to commit to running the football on the schedule.
When I look at the linebacker room, I'm actually okay with some of these guys here. I know you lose Solomon DeShields, who played that star position for you. He's over at Texas A&M, doing pretty well. He was a really fast, explosive impact player there. But I look at a guy like Brandon George, and in his limited snaps last year, I thought he was fantastic. So I'm not super worried about him in that spot. I think Kyle Lewis and Lovelace can provide, potentially some talent. I think there's talent amongst them, right? And then you also have another experienced guy like Thompson as well there, who's had plenty of snaps in college football. I don't feel terrible about this linebacker room. I would say that I'm more confident in this room than maybe the defensive line in the secondary.
Yeah, to lose the guy you mentioned, Solomon Shields going to Texas A&M. How about Bangley Kamara going to South Carolina? Shane Simon off to the NFL. A lot of talent out the door, but again,
But
credit to
I'm
the
fine with
staff,
this. I'm
credit to
fine
the
with this room.
development. Yeah, that's a lot of props I got to give you, Narduzzi and staff there. You mentioned Kyle Lewis. I like him. I like him. He's a guy that plays that a star role in that defense. He could be really, really good. I think they really appreciate his potential there. And then Rasheem Biles, a guy that plays the money role. He could be a guy that's breaking out in camp right now, breaking out potentially early in the season. They would love to have a guy like him emerge to replace those guys that are gone, but also to, I think, almost, be some playmakers because I look around this defense and I'm looking for playmakers on the defensive line and I don't quite see it yet. I'm looking for playmakers, in that secondary and I don't quite see a ton of them. So a guy like Biles and Lewis, can they be difference makers? Guys that can cause negative plays, cause turnovers, add significant jumps in your win probability from play to play just by a singular play. Those are guys that are obviously very, very valuable in college football, but that could be huge for a team like Pitt who's trying to find the margins to win by and to get back to a bowl game.
This cornerback spot, this cornerback room, I I'm very concerned about this corner room. Is that crazy to say? What do you think about this cornerback room?
Yeah, so Devonshire and AJ Woods are gone, right? Obviously, were you great against the pass last year? No. The explosive pass rate plate was in the 110s. That is not where you want to be when there's 130 FBS teams, you know, not ideal defensively in that secondary to be like that. But again, those are guys what we're playing. Now you got to replace them with the guys that weren't ready to play last year. So Rashad Battle coming in. Sounds like he's had a better summer, which is good because they kind of needed a guy like him. Ryland Gandy, a guy that's been there for a while, developed, waited his turn. Now they need him to step up. Tamon Lynham coming over from Nebraska. He had a solid summer. Guy like Jeremiah Anglin from Kentucky as well. Again, I don't know if I love the depth in this room. I don't know if I love the upside in
A
this room
lot, just a
necessarily.
lot of projection. It feels like too. Just
Projection and even like projection to a replacement level player, or above average player potentially in the ACC, and that's not where you want to be. You want to have your projection to be high upside guys, to be guys that can hit the ceiling and break the ceiling for your team, for your defense. I don't quite see it. However, move over to that safety and nickel room real quick before we talk about the safety room. I want to give you a guy, Cruz Brookins. He's a guy that has been tremendous, tremendous in camp. I would love to see him break out and again provide playmaking from that nickel spot. That could be really, really fun and dynamic for this team when you get into your nickel sets.
yeah, and like you said, the safety room. McIntyre, McMillan, guys that have played snaps, been there, done that. At the safety spot, I value snaps more than I do at the cornerback position. So I like that there. I'm okay with their safeties, but regardless, they still had an explosive play issue. There's a huge need at corner here for this team. I'm not insanely impressed by the defensive line. Very concerned about this defense. And I've heard, some guys that I really like to listen to, just to hear like a little bit of a different perspective. A lot of them are pretty high on Pitt to make a bowl game. And look, we'll talk about their schedule here in a second, and it might play out where they could, but I don't know, man. I don't think I can get to 6. All right. So their schedule here, laying it out for you. Week 1, Kent State. I like them in that game. Cincinnati on the road, week 2. I don't like them in that game at all. I like Cincinnati in that game. West Virginia at home. Youngstown State, week 4. Week 5, you get a bye. UNC, you get week 6 on the road. Cal, week 7 at home. Then you get your second bye week, and then you play 6 straight games to end the season. Syracuse at home. SMU on the road. Virginia at home. Clemson at home. Louisville on the road. Boston College on the road. Yeah, I find it really hard because I look at Cincinnati. I see that as a loss. I see West Virginia as a loss. Um, I see UNC on the road is a tough game. I think they could maybe win that game. I think it's a tough game though. Um, I see at SMU as a tough game. I see at Louisville as a tough game. I see at Boston College as a tough game. I see Clemson as a tough game. Virginia's first game. Syracuse, I don't think they're genuinely like I can't say for certain that they are better than anyone on their schedule from their conference. So I can't say that with certainty, right? And maybe if they had drawn Duke, maybe if they had drawn Stanford, I could see them, competing in those games. But even Stanford throws the ball a heck ton. So I don't see a bowl game here. I'm gonna go under 5.5, and I really hope that Narduzzi keeps his job. I don't know. Maybe Pitt fans, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe y'all are tired of him, and maybe the lack of change there. Maybe that's exactly what that program needs. But I'm not seeing a bowl game here.
Yeah, I'm with you on the under two, unfortunately. Obviously, Pitt last year severely disappointed. I don't know if the bottom will fall out like 3-9 again, but I see 5-7 is probably the most likely. I have a feeling they'll steal a couple games in conference and then obviously win, your Kent State and Louisiana, I believe. Is that at Louisiana at the end of the year? That's kind of crazy, by the way. So whatever, whatever. But
Wait, what did you say?
yeah, are they playing at Louisiana in week 13?
No, that's Louisville.
Oh, I just absolutely botched that typing. Oh yeah, duh, 'cause they only played they played 4 out of comps games. Yeah, I just sorry. Sorry. Sorry, Pitt fans. But yeah, unfortunately I'm on the under here. Yeah, Louis, that's a brutal one too. Oh, yeah. And I mean, I'm looking at November there, right? And November's long. We know that.
Yeah.
At SMU, Virginia, who, by the way, wants to win
Briskies
that football game. Like they circled that football game and they want to win that game.
and explosive
Clemson,
play generating team as well.
yep. Clemson obviously has a lot of talent, and same with Louisville on the road at Boston College. Again, you mentioned explosive, dynamic quarterback there in Castellanos. It could be tough. Now, obviously, if they fix, that if you potentially can stop the run, and obviously you let those linebackers run freely and maybe blitz or get after the quarterback and let those maybe some playmakers in that safety room or that nickel room emerge, that could be the different story here. But yeah, I'm the way I'm looking at this here, I see under.
SMU is joining the ACC. They're paying a lot of money to do it, okay? But this is a team that's had a lot of success in the American. Maybe they're a team on the rise with Brett Lashley. And they drew, I mean, good Lord, just about as good of a schedule as you can get. Um, year one in the ACC, playing teams like Stanford, Duke, Pitt, Boston College, Virginia, Cal. Their over and win totals at 8.5. It opened at 7.5. And look, I think this team has some good pieces, but I also think about some spots in this team that I'm like, maybe this is not a Power Five uh position group. You know what I'm saying? I think there's maybe some issues there at certain position groups, but let's get into it because I think Rhett Lashley is a great coach. And I think this is going to work out long term for SMU.
Yeah, they're recruiting at a really, really high level. I mean, Keon Russell, I know it's tough you lose him to Bama, but everyone else, I mean, they're doing it right there, and they got the resources and talent, rich area. Obviously, Rhett Lashley doing there. And yeah, the future is pretty damn bright. This is a team I do buy stock in the future. We'll see how it translates in year one in the ACC. But yeah, you mentioned there is no Clemson, there is no Miami, no North Carolina, no NC State, no Virginia Tech, and no Syracuse on that schedule. You got to feel pretty good about that. Um, so yeah, we're looking at an explosive run game, right? Gap scheme, looking at up tempo offense there from Rhett Lashley. And then Scott Simmons brings, your post safety, not a ton of different versatility there with his back end. But again, they know what they do. They know who they are and they do it well on the defense side of the football. But yeah, I'm ready to get into this here with the quarterbacks. We can start. How about Preston Stone? He's a returning guy. He kind of kicked out Tanner Mordecai last year. He sends him to Wisconsin, who struggled there, but Preston Stone lived up to his high recruiting ranking. I thought very, very good. He's a pretty damn good quarterback. He got hurt at the end of last year. You saw Kevin Jennings come in and play pretty damn well. So you feel good about the backup there. But make no mistake, this is Preston Stone's team. 3,100 yards, 28 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions, and he gives you a little bit on the ground as well. Uh, it's pretty nice. Obviously, it was with the American Conference, who did not have many good defenses, and they were able to beat up on a couple of those teams. But I do feel good about Preston Stone being a solid quarterback in the ACC, in a conference with a lot of good quarterbacks too.
I agree 100%. Now, injury is kind of a concern. He's still recovering, right? I think Kevin Jennings is also going to play in that week 0 game against Nevada. That could also be because they anticipate beating the piss out of Nevada, right? So you're going to see both those quarterbacks out there, but you're not going to see a giant drop off, I think, between the two. I think both of them are really good. If Preston Stone, say, isn't healthy or maybe doesn't look as good, I still feel good about this team throwing out Kevin Jennings. I think he's a solid football player. Maybe uses his legs pretty well. I think they're both good quarterbacks, which is why, the floor of this team isn't significantly lower because I think you're still going to get, at least replacement level quarterback play with Kevin Jennings if Preston Stone isn't fully healthy, right? There's running back room on a different hand is loaded. I mean, loaded. Okay. It's going to be very clear that they're going to try to run the ball. A decent amount, right? And they were a pretty balanced team last year, running the ball 53% of the time, passing it 47% of the time, which is pretty balanced relative to the rest of college football. Jalen Knighton, LJ Johnson, Kamar Wheaton, uh, Rashard Smith, Derek McFall. I mean, just 5 guys that you probably feel pretty good about sending out there um, with with this team, and you still got a ton of questions on the offensive line, but you're not lacking in talent in the running back room, that's for sure.
Now, how many guys can they say? How many teams can say, I guess, coming from G5 to Power Five, where they have legit, five deep running backs that you feel really good about trotting out there? I do think I would like to see them lean on those guys and seeing LJ Johnson and Kamar Wheaton take a step because their talent is absolutely there with them to do so. And the nice thing about it too is yes, you battled injuries, but also you can split guys a ton. And they did that last year where you had, you know, 300 snaps here, 150 snaps here, 200 snaps here. And so it was nice to see a little committee going on, a true committee, because there is not a ton of drop off, in that talent and production from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And I guess we'll see how they continue to do that this year. That wide receiver core, listen, it's a deep room, and it's solid. You could probably play 6 or 7 guys, and they do because they do go up tempo, and they do like to keep fresh bodies out there. But it's really headlined by Jake Bailey and Jordan Hudson. How much does Jordan Hudson take a step from last year? He's a guy that you saw him do some good things when he was in there for sure. It'll be about consistency with him, because he is talented. He is absolutely talented. In year 3 going into it, I think he's ready to take the next step and you'll be, the alpha wide receiver on this team with Jake Bailey in the slot.
I mean, they threw the ball around the yard last year. I mean, just in different spots. I mean, effectively using like RJ Maryland at tight end, effectively using Jake Bailey, Jordan Hudson. I mean, there were plenty of guys. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were like 7 guys with over 24 receptions last year. So there was no shortage of spreading the ball around. And, I don't see why that has to change necessarily. I don't know why it's necessarily a bad thing. Uh, Although, yeah, I don't think that you're seeing necessarily a superstar. I don't think that this room is necessarily a high ranking or highly rated wide receiver group, respective to the other teams in the ACC. I don't feel great about this room, but I'm like, okay, you got a lot of guys returning, a lot of guys with that repertoire with Preston Stone. Maybe that there's some progression there, in that room. Uh, just not necessarily high end elite level talent with this room, right? So, yeah, you feel good about probably your top 4, top 5 guys there, and then obviously RJ Maryland at tight end was very effective. I mean, 34 receptions there for 7 touchdowns. Come on,
Yeah, if there
unbelievable.
is a star on this offense, it's probably RJ Maryland and what he can do creating matchups. And obviously, they didn't ask him to do a ton in the running game, but what he did creating mismatches as a sophomore last year, him and Adam Moore kind of form a pretty nice duo there. And with what you can do, I also like, I think he led the team in targets last year. And obviously, you mentioned they spread the ball around. He had a bunch of guys over 38, 40 targets. So it's good to see that too. I don't, like you said, it's not really a bad thing that no one's really emerging and it's not really a star group. But again, if you can keep the defense honest with everyone out there, that's kind of how they kind of prefer it until you get, your alpha like a Rashid Rice you had a couple years ago and can be a, 1,000 yard plus receiver.
Right, and on this offensive line, okay, you lose a couple pieces on the offensive line that were pretty good for you, but you also get back a couple pieces. I look at guys like Logan Parr. I look at Ben Sparks there. Both those guys in the interior, I think, are very solid. Very solid. Branson Hickman at center, that's a big loss. I thought he was a very, very good very good tack or center, right? I think Marcus Bryant, White were also really good as well. So that center and both your tackle positions, I think, are severe question marks, and you had a guy like PJ Williams come in there, Caleb Johnson, both pretty highly rated guys with not a lot of experience, right? And you also have to wonder, at those guard spots like Logan Park and Ben Sparks, like they're solid, but you know, what kind of schedules were they playing against? Like what kind of defensive lines were they legitimately playing against? Like I look at a team like Boston College that they'll be playing against, and look, Boston College doesn't have a high end defensive line, but that defensive line at Boston College is better than some of the ones that they played last year. That's for sure. So
A bunch of 22 and 23-year-old guys.
yeah, so I think it's going to be an adjustment. Now, I do think that if you have some injuries there, I don't think the drop offs. I think if Logan Parr and Ben Sparks both go down, I think that's pretty bad. But I kind of like what they have in the interior in terms of like those pieces that they can move around there. But those tackle spots I think, are huge question marks, huge question marks. And a guy who just coming off an injury like Preston Stone, like you don't want to have question marks at your tackle positions with a guy like Preston Stone coming off an injury like that.
Yeah, I do say the silver lining there is you look around at I mean, first of all, you have a ton of transfers and former transfers in this room. And I'm seeing a bunch of Arkansas. I'm seeing Notre Dame, Texas, Texas A&M, Florida State, Auburn. Like you're seeing Miami, a lot of big time programs. So these are big bodies that are, quote unquote, power four bodies in the room. Now, how do they develop? How do they mesh together? How can they feel good in this scheme with Rhett Lashley? It remains to be seen. I do think that the talent's in that room. I think a guy like King Large, I don't know how much he can give you if Caleb Johnson and PJ Williams goes down or struggles this year. But King Large, first of all, great name. Secondly, a guy that the staff kind of likes. And that'll be interesting to see what he can do as a true freshman this year. Obviously, not ideal to be moving to a new conference and potentially have to rely upon, a guy like that. But we'll see how Savion Bird develops there, behind a lot of those two guards. We'll see how Justin Osborne is. How much can Aaron Chambly give you at tackle? It'll be interesting. It will be really, really interesting. But at least you got Ja'Kai Clark and Logan Parr and Ben Sparks back as well. It'll be interesting to see, the talent is there in this room. And I think they saw it as a need, obviously, and they went out and filled it. It'll be interesting to see how it all comes together, what the snap count looks like, where's the weaknesses, and how they can potentially hide that with this offense moving to a new conference. But the good part is you kind of get to ease into it with Nevada and Houston Christian. And then, BYU's game, you should absolutely win. You got to win that game. And then you get a bye week to kind of regroup, reassess, okay, who's working for us, what's not working. And then you get to move into your comp and figure it out from there.
Yeah, I think there's some positional versatility with Justin Osborne too, right? Like he played some tackle last year, definitely. So uh I think that those tackle positions are gonna be fluid. I think they like PJ Williams. PJ Williams was a highly rated recruit at Texas A&M, the guy that the staff liked, just got caught into a little bit of trouble off the field. Um that's right though. He's got a second chance here. Uh, he's recruited, I believe, to play kind of interior, but it looks like they're playing him at tackle a little bit. I don't know if you can confirm that or not, but we'll see. We'll see what that tackle position looks like. But Justin Osborne looked good at SMU in his playing time, and he's an older guy, class of 2019, coming out of high school. So I don't feel great about this offensive line because I am worried about the adjustment, right? And I am worried about some of the guys that they lost. I don't think tackle is a position that you should be questioning, um, especially because like some of their harder games are earlier in the season. Like might have to have that figured out by the time you're playing some of the tougher teams on your schedule, like your Louisville, your TCU, your Florida State, all opponents that you play before week 6. So it's very interesting, very interesting. Defensively, look, this team I think overperformed defensively last year. I think they did. I'm not sure how high I am on this team vastly improving in that aspect this year, considering that they're going to be playing. Granted, not a tough schedule for ACC standards, but it is a tougher schedule than what they played last year, especially from a defensive perspective. Okay. I mean, you're playing, like we said, Florida State, TCU, you're going to be playing Louisville. I think Stanford offensively can be pretty effective at times with Troy Taylor there. Uh, Boston College is a little bit dicey there, but Bill O'Brien might have something interesting. Cal has had success offensively last year. We'll see Virginia if they start the right quarterback. Jesus Christ. But I'm interested to see what this defense is going to do against a little bit higher competition, playing against some offenses that might be able to move the football effectively on them. They got a lot of transfers, though. They got a lot of transfers.
Damn it, do they have a type, don't they, on the offensive and defensive line? They like your power four, big named, former, talented, big bodied recruits. And obviously Elijah Roberts worked out coming over from Miami. He was damn good for you last year with double digit sacks. Isaiah Smith, he's there for you too. He had 3 sacks. He's got to step up in a big way. Jafari Harvey, how does Cameron Robertson? How is he playing? It'll be interesting to see. I do think there's a good amount of bodies in this room in terms of talent and size, but it'll be about consistency. It'll be about finding the right guys, the right pieces to fit in Scott Simmons' defense. And again, if you are taking what 8 transfers, like to me, that tells you there's an absolute need that was not being met there, pre-spring practice. So obviously a lot to mesh and a lot to figure out, but let's see. And interiorly, it sounds like they like Jonathan Jefferson, excuse me, from Georgia coming over. Pair him with Hudson or Harrison Hunt, who was at Miami last year. Corey Robertson's coming back for you, which is a good thing. It's an old guy. I'm looking at a ton of 19 and 20 graduates. And so that's a great thing to be where you're old on the offensive line. But again, like there's a reason why, these guys maybe aren't playing at their other spots. You got to tap into something that the coaching staffs weren't quite tapping into. Sometimes it's just about depth, and they're just buried on the depth chart because there's some, first, second round picks in front of them at these other schools. But the reality is it's still not a guarantee. They're still, just because they are older doesn't mean that they are experienced necessarily. Although I do like Anthony Booker as an older guy as well, coming from Arkansas and Maryland. We'll see what he can do for you, as well as, Mike Lockhart and Blake Burris. It's a lot of transfers, though, man. It is a lot of transfers. And again, it's not something you want to be relying upon in year one in the ACC. But I guess if you kind of had to do a quick fix and you want to look like a power forward team, you're taking a bunch of power forward transfers. So I guess that's step one.
I do want to mention breaking news as we're recording this. Kamar Wheaton, unfortunately, out for the season with a knee surgery. So I know we just talked about him being an
Oh,
important part in the running back room. Literally, as we're recording this, with terrible
at
luck.
least they're deep there, but that sucks for him. He's a talented player. Hope he gets all right.
Yeah, I agree. So, well, we'll see him. I guess we'll see him next fall, right? But I guess Brashard Smith, Derek McFall might be getting some action. They might be getting some action in that third and fourth string running back spot there, behind those top two guys. So, but yeah, moving on. The linebacker room. It's pretty interesting because they feel good about it because they didn't get anyone in the transfer portal really. Well, they got just Medlock, right? Who played over there at Utah, but he didn't play a lot of significant snaps over there. Kobe Wilson, I think, is really good. I like Ahmad Walker. Alexander Kilgore is also pretty decent. I think they got a good set here at the linebacker position.
I do worry about the transition, because in certain positions, I do think it's tougher to go from lower level to higher level in terms of speed of the game, athleticism, and the offensive linemen in the power four, they move really well. A lot of these guys do. And so it'll be tough to see. It'll be interesting to see, Wilson and Walker and how they adjust. I do like Kilgore. I do think Kilgore is a legit ACC talented type of, linebacker for you there. Jaquanis Burns is a former 4-star kid. Justin Medlock, you mentioned the guy from Utah. The staff kind of likes what he's doing so far. And I think it's pretty exciting that you brought him in and you feel pretty good about him. So yeah, this room to me is about as deep as it gets and about as talented at the top end too. Um, we'll see how Wilson and Walker adjust. They were very good last year for you. Um, Even if you take a slight drop off, I still think this can be a pretty good group heading in the ACC. And again, this is a nice place not to be weak at because we've seen time and time again teams just get exposed for bad linebacker play. And at least, you feel pretty good about not having that this year with SMU.
Right. The secondary. I think it's a little bit dicier, I think, in this area. You got some guys that have had snaps. Okay. I think there's plenty of pieces, okay, but like we don't know what those pieces are going to look like, and they got to figure it out fast, right? Because the schedule is a little bit tougher in the first half than it is in the second half, in terms of their ACC play. I don't know. I mean, Deuce Harmon is a talented kid, right? We'll see bringing him over from Texas A&M what that can do for your team. It seems like they didn't get a ton of guys in the transfer portal here though, like they did on the defensive line. So maybe that's a sign that they feel pretty good about it. You like Jonathan McGill and the experience that he has there. Um, in Wachovia, I mean, some guys with some decent experience and some good snaps that have played some good football, but we'll see how the adjustment is, playing against some pretty good receivers here and good quarterbacks in the ACC.
Yeah, Nick Wolpe, he's fun. He's a playmaker. He had 4 interceptions, 61 tackles for you last year. You're hoping that he can take a step alongside Jonathan McGill. Those are probably two of your better players in the back end. It'll be interesting to see how Deuce Harmon plays because, I mean, we've seen him kind of in and out of the lineup at A&M. Obviously, you mentioned the talent he does have. You're hoping in year 4 he can take a step and learn about and get that consistency to pair with Jalen Davis Robinson, former LSU guy. Those guys probably going to be your starters there on the outside. So it's interesting to see what kind of depth that they do get, from your Jahari Rogers, right? From your AJ Davis, Kyron Chambers. Is he ready yet in year 3? Michael DeHoyas, right? He's also maybe a younger, more power, hungry kid in that room, and those true freshmen. I think they could be good players at some point, but obviously not in 2024. You don't want to be relying upon them. So yeah, it's about Harmon and Davis Robinson and consistency in replacing Charles Woods and Meganson, who were pretty good for you last year, and they'll obviously be put into a more prominent role than they're maybe used to in the past. But we'll see how they do respond. Um, and whatnot. I do want to say if you want the secondary there, the punter, or I'm sorry, your kicker, Colin Rogers. He's a legit player. It was all AAC last year. Um, it's a pretty damn good player to have as well. And then you've got your Roderick Daniels. You've got some pretty explosive guys. Rashard Smith as a good kick returner as well. So you feel pretty good with your specialists there, moving to new conference. Hopefully, be able to crack open some games at some point with the talent there. Returning kicks and punts, and also having a consistent kicker like Colin Rogers.
Yeah, I do think you play some pretty high level receivers though on this schedule. I mean, I'm looking at TCU, I'm looking at Florida State, Louisville, Stanford, even Boston College. I think that receiving room's fine. I think Virginia's got some dudes.
California likes their
California
guys.
likes their guys at receiver. So you don't want to be weak at the cornerback position. And obviously, having great safeties like Mokobia, right, and McGill, like can, alleviate some of the explosive plays that can happen. But you don't want to be, you don't want to have your first year going into a Power 5, Power 4 conference, right, and being weak at the cornerback position or potentially some spots maybe on the offensive line. Like I don't like some of the question marks there. Now the offensive line could definitely prove me wrong for sure. These cornerback spots could definitely prove me wrong. I worry about them a little bit. I don't think those are positions that those are the positions that I would say you need to have settled in before you're going to move up to the Power 4, right? Because there's a huge talent gap there that needs to be met, and some of that in certain positions was alleviated by the transfer portal, but was it enough? We don't know. Looking at the schedule, of course, we talked about this line opening up at 7.5 and it being at 8.5 now. Out of conference, right? You play 2 Power 5 teams, right? But those are winnable games, and you get them at home, right? So Nevada, you get in week 0 on the road. You should pound them, all right? If you don't, there's a huge problem. Houston Christian, you get at home. Week 1, week 2, BYU, you get at home. BYU is not very good. Okay, if you are having issues with BYU, I think that there's an underlying issue then with particularly the defense. If you're letting BYU move the football on you, week 3 you get a bye. TCU at home. Week 4, I think TCU is a good team. I think TCU will probably win that game, even though they get them at home. FSU at home. Week 5, Louisville on the road. Week 6, week 7 you get a bye. Stanford on the road. Week 8, Duke on the road. Week 9. Pitt at home week 10, 11 is bye. Boston College week 12, you get them at home. Virginia on the road week 13. Cal, you get them at home week 14. So obviously the back half of the schedule being a lot easier than the front half of that ACC schedule. I'm actually on the under here at 8.5. I know this is a really doable schedule, but I do question the move. From G5 to P5. I mean, Boston College gave them the business. I know that bowl game was a little bit tough because the field conditions were absolutely abysmal. But I think Boston College is going to be a tough game for them. I think at Stanford, going across the country like that. I know it's a little bit better geographically for SMU than some of the other teams in the ACC, but I think that's not an easy game. I think FSU, TCU, and Louisville are all losses, and I think playing Virginia on the road is also kind of a scary game. Cal, fortunately, get them at home, but I think there's too many games on this schedule for me to confidently believe that they're going to win 9 games. So I'm gonna have to. I'll take the under here.
Yeah, I'll go the under two. I see three auto losses and then room for more. It's not something, maybe I'll be betting. The more I get closer to the season, I might go in week 0. I might take the under just because I do worry, about the depth and some of that consistency at certain spots. Well, and dude, the shift is just tough. We've seen them struggle in the past with, your UCF, your Cincinnati's, your Houston's, Memphis, right?
BYU.
You've seen them struggle with TCU and Oklahoma. Yep. And so it's also just obviously Boston College in the bowl game. Listen, I like this team.
Oh,
It's
sorry,
talented. I
not
do.
BYU. Sorry, I thought you were talking about teams moving from G5 to P5, but
Well, yes, but in
that
in
too.
terms
But
of when they were in the AAC,
correct.
some of the top Redshirt teams were consistently beating SMU, and we saw them struggle with their move to the Big 12. They do get a lot of bottom feeders in this conference, which is nice in year 1, but I still think it still means a lot of losable football games. And I think these teams are hungry, like Stanford and Duke, right? Boston College, they're Virginia, they're looking at this game and they're like, this is a game we got to have. And they're gonna get their best shots, I think, from a lot of teams. Um, Especially once they get into October and November, where you could be worried about some depth and attrition at certain spots where you don't have a ton of experience behind those starters. Yeah, I mean, listen, I like the future and the program and the way it's heading at SMU. I love Rhett Lashley and what he's doing there,
1000%.
recruiting and whatnot. But this year, I think could be a little bit more of a surprise than I think some people think for SMU, and maybe what Vegas says too. Yeah, I'm on the under as well.
Troy Taylor is one of my favorite coaches in college football, and he's just in his second year. He's with the Stanford Cardinal. This is a really interesting team because, of course, they're joining the ACC, so they got to travel a ton, just like Cal does, right? All the way from coast to coast to coast to coast. But teams that have to travel to Stanford, I traveling to Stanford and Cal from the Atlantic coast, I think is going to be really interesting. Seeing those traveling dynamics and how they work out, and maybe Stanford and Cal catching some teams sleeping. I'm really, really interested to see how that works out this year. I can't be alone in that, right, CD?
No, I think it's going to be something to look out for, and not only in the ACC, but also, look at the Big Ten as well. Going to be something. Obviously, we talk about conference expansion and how is it going to look? How are these players? And honestly, this is a college football podcast, but look at other college sports, man. And midweek travel, cross country, it's going to be tough. It's going to
Yeah.
be brutal. I don't know how. I mean, I'm a college student, right? I don't know how you do that and also take classes and expect to excel in them. Credit to these staffs for trying to figure it out. Credit to these athletes for being able to not only study whatnot, but travel across country and have to perform their best. But let's get into this team here because, listen, dare I say, I kind of like Stanford. And no, they're not going to win the ACC, probably not. But I do think they are a team that's going to give teams fits just with the way not only does Troy Taylor run his offense, and he's calling plays now, by the way, which I think is awesome, especially for a team like Stanford. I mean, look at Stanford, you know, creating edges for your team, creating mismatches for your team, and without having to pay players or have a certain level of talent, because obviously Stanford, obviously a very, very established academic school there. Sometimes you're limited in terms of your portal acquisitions and whatnot, your NIL program, but being able to establish an edge through your offense coordinator, who is your head coach, that could be obviously huge moving forward for Stanford. Let's talk about that quarterback room. Okay, Ashton Daniels, I know, right? He was okay last year. 191 of 325, 2,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Was he elite? No, but he was young. He's figuring it out. He took 27 sacks. And yes, part of that's on him, but also the offensive line was also figuring out last year, who returned a ton of production there as well. But the headliner was Elijah Brown. I think a lot of Stanford fans were coming in and expecting Brown to come in and just take the bull by the horns and win that job as a true freshman, which, by the way, It's crazy. Crazy expectations to put on a kid. I know he was very, very good coming from Otter Day. But again, I'm kind of glad Daniels won that job because I do think, Brown could play this year and play well for sure. But I do think Daniels kind of increases the floor on his team and as well as the development that sounds like he's had behind the scenes could be something that I think the staff will be rewarded for sticking with him last year and then obviously having him start this year as well.
Yeah, this running back room, I'm not feeling awesome about. Look, EJ Smith was pretty good running back for you last year, given the situation that he was in. He heads over to Texas A&M, and look, he could be in a larger role maybe now that Ruben Owens is hurt. But the point is, you don't have him over at Stanford anymore. You're gonna be relying on a guy like Cedric Irvin, a true sophomore, maybe Micah Ford, a true freshman. Like you're looking at a lot of guys in this room that you very inexperienced or just young. And is Ryan Butler gonna be? I mean, former walk on. I mean, I just this is a concern room for me.
Yeah. Well, listen, I was when I before I really was diving into it too. And you're again, projection. You're talking about you bring in three true freshmen that are probably at least a couple of them are gonna have to play and play meaningful snaps for you. But it sounds like a guy like Micah Ford is really, really impressing. He's a guy that was a high school quarterback coming in, still learning a position, and just with his athleticism, football IQ, his balance, contact, physicality, all that stuff that he learned, also playing the quarterback position. It sounds like they really like him. They got a good guy there. But again, yeah, to me, it's like Irving and Butler, those are going to be guys that have to play and play well to give time for Chris Davis, Cole Tab, Micah Ford to develop there. Obviously, you don't want to be relying upon one or multiple true freshmen to give you meaningful snaps in the ACC, especially when you're traveling across the country. Like defense and running game, that stuff matters when you're traveling, and that's a huge hat to have in your back pocket. And that defense last year was not great either.
Not
So
great
again,
is very generous.
I gotta be generous, but yeah, I'm with you, and a little bit concerning for sure. But I would love to be proven wrong, and we'll see week one with TCU. I mean, that's gonna be a fun game, and I guess we'll talk about that more. We already did talk about that too, by the way. If you want to check our full game preview, it's already out on the YouTube channel to go watch. But this wide receiver room, to me, this is where I see the Stanford team being able to take a next step and giving teams headaches.
Wide receiver room. It's kind of nice. I like some of the top end talent there. Now, can I say that I am in love with this depth? Maybe Emmett Mosley comes out of there as a true freshman and kind of
Please, he's
balls
healthy.
out.
Please be healthy.
Please be healthy. But that's a guy that I think a lot of insiders have liked a lot and could potentially be a superstar down the road for you. But Like Manor is just a phenomenal wide receiver and football player over there with 62 catches for over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns last year. Obviously, you know him from the Colorado game when he single-handedly absolutely torched um, Travis Hunter and won that game for Stanford against Colorado. He was really good for you last year, and look, I drafted him in our fantasy draft between CD and I, so I got my shares in my guy. I got my shares. So I'm liking some of the names in these receiver rooms. Like you said, if Mosley's healthy and he's, as good as people are saying that he is out there in camp. I mean, this could be a nice little three-headed monster, assuming that Mosley emerges.
Yeah, I'd love to see a guy like Jackson Harris, who's kind of was hurt right with the hamstring injury. Sounds like he's back and playing well, especially if Mosley has to miss a couple games or is limited snap count, whatever it may be, in September. How about Bryce Farrell in the slot? Can he be a reliable weapon for you? I repeat everything you just said, right? Not to repeat everything you said, retweet that, whatever it may be. I like that for Ashton Daniels to be able to dominate that tight end room. I mean, Eurosec is a good player, really good
Yeah.
player. It sucks that he's gone. It really does. We'll see how Sam Rush, kind of fills that. Benji Blackburn, how much is he going to play? Just because of his athleticism and all that stuff. Griffin Weiss coming over from Washington. To me, this is a group that doesn't quite get me super excited Again, it's the tight end room. In the
I
tight end
mean,
room, if you're going to be weak,
Roush Roush was really good last year. I don't think it's going to be a significant drop off.
ah,
I'm high on Rush, so I'm maybe a little bit on the other side of the spectrum. But I mean, 28 receptions, 288 yards. That's pretty explosive to me. Just didn't find the end zone, right? Just did not find the end zone. I'm I don't know. I mean, I think Jurasek. I mean, obviously didn't play the whole season, but I don't know. I think Jurasek's a really good player, but I think a lot of that, dare I say, was one game where he was really really good last year. And you saw the ceiling. I'm just saying.
yeah.
I think Rush kind of that dude, man. I think he's that dude.
Listen, I hope so. But to be honest, it doesn't matter if that offensive line is atrocious, right? It really doesn't. And everyone is back, which is fantastic. And it sounds like you've got guys who are pushing them behind the scenes, right? It sounds like you got 6 guys, maybe 7 guys that are competing for spots, right? That are, maybe moving positions, whatever it may be. Oh, but man, oh man, oh man. Last year was tough. It was. That's okay. Year one under Troy Taylor. Bekleno, Luke Beklenko, is he healthy this year? Hopefully, he's probably moving left tackle, I believe. You kind of like him there? Is moving Jack Laner down? You kind of have like a rotation there with him, and if Blenko's hurt, and then Layer also like it's gonna be weird. It's gonna be weird. Obviously, you got to figure it out come Friday because it's TCU week 1, and then you get Cal Poly in a bye. You can figure things out moving into the ACC, but you would love to steal one early, wouldn't you? You would love to steal one early, and I look at TCU and I'm like, I don't know if I love their defensive line, and I mean, it's not a defense line is going to just give you crazy problems, give everyone problems in the Big 12. If your O line can be serviceable, I mean, who's guarding A-minor? Who's guarding them? And also, you can open up running games for your running backs who maybe could be question marks.
Yeah, I I'm on the side. I think this offensive line can be okay. I mean, you were playing two true freshmen for a good chunk of the season. You didn't really feel like you knew what you had. You were adjusting to a very unique system, right? But year two, with everyone back, those true freshmen becoming true sophomores,
Yep.
I I don't think this is a top half offensive line in the ACC by any means, but I do think it might be a little bit criminally underrated. Okay, so I again, I think every room except the running back room on this team, I actually like a lot, and I think Troy Taylor is working with plenty more than he was last year. So I'm very excited to see what they end up doing because in the second half of the season, it felt like they were kind of dialed in there, man. They were dialed in. So I like Ashton Daniels. I like Elijah Brown. I'm high on this offense. The defense, though, the defense just abysmal last year. 131st in points per game allowed, 131st in total yards per game allowed, 131st in third down stop percentage. Right, passing yards per game. You were last in the country giving up passing yards per game. I mean, just teams were throwing. Teams only ran the ball in Stanford, Christopher, 51% of the time, which sounds like a lot, but that was like top 20 in the country. Only 17 teams in the country were run on less than teams ran on Stanford. Like, and you would think about all those games
And
that
they were
Stanford
they were the game script too.
and the game script. Like you think about Stanford, all those games that they were losing, teams just knew that they could just throw the ball all around the yard with this Stanford defense. And yeah, I don't know if that changes much. I mean, you get those guys back in that cornerback room, but I the concerns about this defense are very high, very very high. Is that how you feel?
Yeah. Listen, to me, I'm looking at, your returners and you kind of see a lot of guys coming back
A ton.
that
Hell
maybe
yeah.
maybe, are taking leaps. We'll see. David Bailey's a guy I like. I like him. If you can find it, I like him actually. Will Dread A bar, is he going to be a guy that can take a step forward, right? Tafiti, him and Cooper, right? Are those guys? Is Cooper healthy? How are they getting there? How about some young guys in Dubray, Issa Dubray, and Dylan Stevenson? Guys that seem to be flashing behind the scenes. They're battling there, for your second and third team reps there. Benedict Uma, prize recruit, coming all the way across the country. I don't know if he'll give you much this year. That's all right. That's all right. You'll take some lumps this year, but again, that speaks to the recruiting with Troy Taylor and what he's doing there. Anthony Franklin, Patterson, Clay Patterson's probably hurt right now. Hopefully you get him back soon. The staff likes him. He's a difference maker, I think, for your team and being able to stop the run interiorly. And then, you got a guy like Toby Phillips and Zach Buckley, Zach Roel, like those guys step up and kind of, fill him by the aggregate. And we'll see if that happens, especially, early in the season. But the thing is, TCU has a transfer laden offensive line. Like there is, if you're gonna get TCU on the offensive line, get them in week one, right? And I worry about the defensive line being able to take advantage of that because that could be a difference in this game for sure. But however, that linebacker room, I kind of like.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I mean, look, you're getting back all of those snaps basically in that linebacker room, which what do we say about the linebacker position? That is probably the position where snaps probably is more indicative of success than like really any other position, I guess. Like the more experienced you are at linebacker, the better you are going to play, the more you're going to be in the right position, which in many cases is just as important as being talented, right? So look, you get Bernadette back, you get Sinclair. Both those guys had over 650 snaps. I thought David Bailey was pretty solid for you last year, so he's going to be in that linebacker room as well. You run a really interesting defense. Was it the 2-5-2 or whatever it is, or
Well,
two
so
five
I think
five
they're
four
installing, and I don't. We'll see. We'll see week one.
two
Definitely
four
gonna be
five?
something to watch out. So they're installing a 3-3-5 stack, and it
Oh yeah.
sounds like they're also running a 1-4-6 and a 1-5-5, which is fucking awesome. Excuse my
Where
language.
do you see that? You never see that.
I know. I mean, first of all, Troy Taylor is awesome. Bobby April is there, that defense coordinator. We'll see what happens. I mean, to me, does that worry you about potential defensive line issues? Yeah, maybe.
Okay,
But
well, let
again,
me ask you this though, CD. Like in a 3-3 stack, you were a Mike linebacker who had 206 tackles in the state of Illinois in a 3-3 stack, right? Like, is it really important that you have dominating defensive line, or is it more important that you have defensive line that do their jobs and have good linebackers?
eat blocks and have linebackers that are quick enough to be able to move and fill holes and not be late. And not be late's the key thing. And Sinclair's guy, I think, is a leader of that defense, physical football player. I think he can thrive in that scheme potentially. And you got guys like McGee and Pulsifer behind him. We'll see if Matt Rose gets healthy. He could be a contributor, especially if you're running five linebackers at one time. Obviously, you'll have a guy like David Bailey. It's probably going to be more, these edge rushers that are, potentially standing up, with 2 feet and could be dropping back in coverage. And what you can do with that, especially, I mean, if you got shredded last year in the past, wouldn't you kind of come up with some fun stuff to be able to get more playmakers and speed on your defense and to also disguise coverages better? Like that, again, credit to that staff for hopefully being able to fix what was a tremendous weakness last year. And speaking of that passing group, the DBs, is it going to get better?
I mean, you get your corners back. You you get Wright and Manley both, by the way, over 800 snaps. By the way, I think Colin Wright's a pretty good football player, but
Yeah, I think
besides
he's
the
an NFL body.
yeah, besides the point, the rest of the room, like I don't know, you get Scotty Edwards back. I'm I'm at a loss because they're getting a lot of these guys back, but they were so bad last year. They were so bad last year that you have to wonder like how much can one year really fix? Like let's say though that this bottom 10, bottom 5 pass defense in the entire country becomes, a bottom 30, a bottom 40. like that's a pretty significant difference, right? But it doesn't feel like it is, but that can do a lot for you. That can do a lot for you. And like when I look at the schedule, okay, because we're gonna talk about it here pretty soon. There's some games where you might not be playing the best quarterbacks,
No,
you know?
not at all.
Now there's some games you are playing some really good quarterbacks, but there's some games you're not. Teams that might not be pushing the ball down the field as much. So man,
Here's what I'll say about that secondary. Last year, you mentioned obviously all the snaps coming back. They did not rotate a ton, and part of that was injury, and part of that too, I think, was year one just not having depth, not having competitive depth that you can throw out multiple guys. And I think part of the beauty of moving to your 3-3-5, moving to 5 to 6 line defensive backs at a time, you could rotate those guys. And so you've got a guy like Cam Richardson who's been fighting, having a good camp. You got Brandon Nicholson, a guy that's gonna see time as well. Jay Green, he's a guy with great length that the staff likes. Jashawn Frosto Ramos, he's a guy moving to safety. Ojarike, he's a guy that's been hurt too, but I think they want to get him on the field. Listen, I think that's positive notes. I think you're seeing development there. I think you're seeing competition there. And outside of Colin Wright, I think, everyone else, I don't mind if they're rotating, keeping guys fresh, disguising coverages, maximizing these guys if they have certain weaknesses in their game, being able to mix and match these players and these talents and these skill sets to be able to put together a competitive pass defense. Because, like you said, that schedule. Listen, I'll say, I guess can we move that schedule now?
think,
It's a tough one. I think they got zero favors.
shafty.
Zero favors. Listen, you have one football game at home in the ACC that is a team that like you're pounding the table that has to be a win. All your other games that would be competitive, right? That you feel good about competing in, they're on the road. And sometimes you're traveling across the country. Sometimes you're just traveling a little bit south, but you go into California, like University of California. But listen, I guess I'll get into it here. Week one, obviously, we talked about that a couple times now. TCU, there's our game preview in that. So once you're done liking and subscribing and sharing this video, right, go check that out because, listen, I happen to think that Stanford has a chance to win that football game. Drew, who gets picked on there, he took you guys to win. And listen, I like Stanford to cover in that football game. Cal Poly week two, bye week three, on the road at Syracuse and on the road at Clemson in back-to-back weeks 4 and 5. And it doesn't get easier with Virginia Tech in week 6, Notre Dame on the road week 7, SMU week 8, Wake Forest at home week 9, and NC State on the road at week 10. That is a brutal, brutal 7-game stretch you have there to get to a bye to finish with Louisville week 12 at California in week 13, and you finish off week 14 with Mountain West and new Coach Ken, there at San Jose State. Over and win total 3.5, juiced to the over there. A ton of juice. A play that I would totally be on. However, I cannot swallow minus 170, minus 185 some places and just justify that because I see 3-0. I see Cal Poly, I see San Jose State, and I see Wake Forest as games I feel really good about Stanford winning, and it's just one more. And if you're telling Troy Taylor, you tell me Troy Taylor just to win one more game, he's not supposed to win. Give me that.
How do we feel about Louisville coming into town there?
Dude,
Caught
after
catch
a bye week, man,
catching Jeff Brom sleeping.
and they do it every year. Every year.
Every year there's a
Last year it
game
was
that Jeff
Pitt.
Brom loses that he shouldn't.
And now the good news for Louisville is they are by week 11. So they have a bye right before that as well. So they have a chance to adjust for that travel issue. But that's also, 3 out of 4 weeks on the road. And then Miami, Florida is that one home team. So they're going to be beaten up. And I don't know how much they can really take advantage of that bye week in terms of install and fixing things out. It's going to be more about let's just rest and recuperate.
Give me the over.
Me too.
Let's go. I think they're getting to 4 wins. I think they can get to 5 wins. I really do. I don't know that they'll be Cal, but
Alt line, alt line, alt line.
I think they can beat Wake. Well, I love them against Wake Forest. I think they can beat SMU,
Yeah, dude, that's not crazy at all.
and I think they can beat Louisville at home. I think Syracuse on the road. Now it's tough with that travel, right? But it's still pretty early in the season with a lot of transfers there.
It's right after a bye. You have a bye week.
Yeah, what's tough is that you get your really tough, brutal stretch, like kind of near the beginning of the season. So like attrition at some positions could be an issue down the road when you're trying to win that game against San Jose State to get to 4 wins and cash this. But yeah, I like this. You can actually get it at 4 at some places, like for plus 105. But yeah, it's not a bet for me either one of those. But I do because we always pick, right? We have to pick every single win total on this show. You and I, it seems like we're both on the over, and I like that. A brand new coach in Fran Brown over there at Syracuse. What a marvelous job he has done the second he walked in there. I mean, you bring in a guy like Elijah Robinson as your defensive coordinator. Talk about just a powerhouse of recruiters, and it's already paying dividends for you on the recruiting trail. And it obviously paid dividends in the transfer portal because look, this Syracuse win total, what is that, 7.5? Is that what it's at? Just in 1 year? When you're
It's
playing a
crazy.
tight end in a bowl game at your quarterback position, you're over a win total of 7.5.
Wow. To me, and then we'll get to the schedule eventually, but I think part of it is we talked about Stanford getting no favors by the ACC.
So I guess
Syracuse
7.
kind of did.
Over went to 7 in most places. I guess not 7. 7.5 you can get at some places, but 7 is where it's at.
To me, I'm thinking about more of a favorable schedule. You're missing teams like Clemson and Florida State. I don't see Miami on that schedule. So you're looking at three of the big time contenders in the ACC, as well as some frisky teams that you're missing. Yeah, I listen. If there's a year to strike in year one, we saw Louisville do it last year with Jeff Brom. Fran Brown knows that, and they went out and they got a quarterback that's pretty talented in Kyle McCord. Obviously, no. Did he live up to that 5-star ranking at Ohio State? No, that's okay. Listen, let's swap that Ohio State did 3-team trade, whatever you want to call it, with Will Howard going over um to Ohio State and then Kyle McCord going over to Syracuse. I think both teams, actually all 3 teams and Kansas State as well, can be happy. I think that's the thing that we don't accept. Where like both, maybe multiple teams can be happy and win. I think Kyle McCord, considering Syracuse fans understand the type of quarterback play you've had recently, he could be a significant upgrade. He absolutely can. And what he can do. Obviously, there's no Marvin Harrison Jr. to throw to, but there's some talent in that room. You got a good running back. I like Jeff Nixon and Mike Johnson calling plays for you. Listen, I think Kyle McCord, it was a nice get. That's what I'm saying. I think a lot of teams would be happy to have a guy with his experience, his arm talent, and whatnot, his pedigree on your team and on your roster. And he's what, year 4 now? Year 5? Whatever it may be. I think it's year 4. Again, older dude, very, very productive at Ohio State. Again, he didn't beat Michigan. Boo hoo. Nobody did last year. So I don't know. I don't know. And even Michael Johnson behind him. I mean, he would be a kind of a total change up for Kyle McCord. Very athletic, but you could do some fun
Carlos
things with
Del
him
Rio
there.
Wilson, who was terrible last year when he played.
Yeah.
Kyle McCord goes down. I think this team's in trouble when it comes to quarterback play.
Well, again, I think with Johnson, you're gonna see more of a kind of like you had a tight end last year playing quarterback. You're gonna see a lot of running the football. And as a guy that owns the Quentin Allen in fantasy, our fantasy, I feel pretty good because he is a star. I think he's really dynamic. Really dynamic.
Absolute. I mean, got to move for this bell cow right here because he will be getting the majority of the carries. They're going to want to feed him. He's very good at the game of football, very downhill runner, but also has some explosive tendencies to him in some ways. But yeah, this guy, LaQuinn Allen is no joke All right, and I think when Sean Tucker went to the NFL, LaQuint Allen kind of took over there.
Upgrade,
LaQuint Allen,
upgrade, upgrade.
yeah, it
Listen,
not
Sean
crazy.
Tucker, Syracuse fan knows his Twitter was awesome. His Twitter follow was
Yeah, he's
crazy.
like,
He would just be,
wish I could have played better today.
it was just
Maybe,
like
yeah.
it was like almost wholesome, but again, it came off as just like weird because it's Twitter. But behind Allen, you have Yasin Willis, who has been really, really good in camp. Obviously, you mentioned the bell cow that Allen is going to be, but having Willis is nice because if something does happen to Allen, that it'd be nice to have there. That wide receiver room. Okay, we'll talk about guys that Common Cord is going to be throwing the football to, and obviously we'll get to Nick Gadsden. We'll talk about him as a tight end. He's obviously we'll get to him. So obviously Damien Alford dismissed from the team. I think this is a good group, not elite group. I think this is a good group.
Well, if Justice Ross Simmons is available at some point this season, then I would say, yeah, it's a pretty decent group.
Yeah, we'll see what Zede Haynes can do for you as being maybe an explosive down the field vertical threat for you. Trevor Pena, a guy that can be in the slot and do some good things for you. Daryl Gill Jr., DJ DGJ, excuse me, a guy that's been impressing, I think, the staff there, and also McCord, and then Omari Hatcher, the guy that I'm hoping steps up for you guys. Sounds like he has in camp. We'll see if that continues to develop throughout camp, and then also into September, I guess early August, when you do play and open up the season with Ohio. Yeah, I mean, Jackson Meeks is there, talented kid. We'll see. I mean, you're talking about if Ross Simmons is healthy, when he gets back healthy, you're talking about 4 to 5 to 6 maybe guys, along with a pretty exciting tight end group. You could be a lot worse shape in year one for Fran Brown.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Nick Gadsden being back is so huge. I mean, just like when he went down at the beginning of the season last year, just such a it's really deflating when like a guy of that elite talent goes down. And when you're so versatile, put him out wide, put him at tight end, like wherever you want to put him. It's just so versatile like that. It's similar way to RJ Maryland, right? Another really good tight end. I say type because he plays tight
Big
end, I
slot
guess.
receiver.
Yeah, just a glorified gigantic slot receiver is what those two guys are, and that's not a diss at all. These guys are phenomenal. NFL teams are going to be eyeing those guys for sure. The offensive line. Where are we with this offensive line, CD?
Okay, I think there's a ton of question marks, but I do think the staff likes the depth and the competition there. Now, here's the thing: if your staff is, talking up the competition, and unless you're Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State, that probably means that they're trying to figure out spots. And they're trying to not have the floor fall out under this team. But here's the thing: Demetrius Witherspoon is a legit dude. I think he has Sunday body type potential coming over from Howard. He played right tackle there. Is he moving left tackle? That's what I've kind of been reading. And again, good because you probably want your best offensive lineman at left tackle, but that's going to be a transition for him, not only going up a level in competition, but switching over to the left side there. Savion Washington, gonna play right tackle for you probably. And listen, he wasn't the best at Colorado, but there was a lot of things wrong with that offensive line and that scheme potentially, later in the year with Colorado. He was really good for Kent State. Not long ago was he a highly, highly prized offensive line transfer portal commit for Colorado. I think that's great to shore up your tackles, to have those bodies in Washington and Witherspoon. You could be doing a lot worse. Now you got also guys competing, Enrique Cruz, Josh Miller, David Wahalaba. Like those are guys that are also competing, and they talk about the depth and competition. That's where you see it. That's where you see it emerge with those guys there. Now we'll see. We'll see. I mean, uh, again, I like to be optimistic in the offseason. I really do. I really do. But again, we'll see. It kind of sets up nicely to almost you know, ease your way into this offensive line. Yes, Georgia Tech is in week 2, and with the way they looked last week, I mean, That could be a tough game, but it's at home for sure. But then you get a bye week and then Stanford and Holy Cross, UNLV, and then you get into your real meat and potato of the ACC schedule, not until week 7. So listen, I think it could be a lot worse for
Yeah.
you.
When you're looking at win totals, I think the dynamic in your offensive line staying healthy, having those easier games early, helps so that you are healthy, that you aren't experiencing that real attrition when you have to go play these teams when you actually when you have a chance to win, right? So yeah, I'm with you. A lot of questions about the offensive line, but it could be a surprising unit. It could be, especially at those tackle spots like you were talking about. But and here's the thing: I don't think LaQuint Allen needs the best offensive line out there, right? Like they're still gonna pound the rock with him. I think they're still gonna find a way. I mean, what they ran the ball. Now, some of this was because you had basically glorified running backs playing quarterback, right? But they ran the ball 60% of the time, which was like ninth in the country. So that's a significant number. Obviously, that was due to some quarterbacks not actually being quarterbacks or really good ones. I think Garrett Schrader basically was a wide receiver
God
playing
bless Garrett
quarterback.
Schrader. God bless Garrett Schrader.
I love Garrett Schrader. I love watching him play. But this is going to be a different look offense, I think, where the rushing attack is going to depend on LaQuint Allen, not necessarily Garrett Schrader as well, or any other quarterback slash tight end that wants to be playing quarterback for Syracuse. But uh, here here's the part of the team that I'm very
Wait,
intrigued by because
real quick before we move on to the defense, I do want to say last thing about McCord. He was much better when they ran the ball effectively with Trayvon Henderson. When he was in there creating explosive plays, keeping you ahead of the chains. That's something I'm looking forward to. And that part of the reason why I'm optimistic on his transition to Syracuse is because of LaQuint Allen and his ability to be able to keep you just what he can do. What he can do, man. Give him the rock and see what happens. Not to interrupt you though, but yeah, let's get into it.
the defense, Elijah Robinson, you guys, your defensive coordinator now, who's um never really called plays before. At least to my knowledge, at least recently. When he was at Texas A&M, he didn't call plays. Okay, even when he was the interim head coach, I don't believe he called the plays for that defense. So it'll be interesting to see. But the talent is, I think it's here. I think
Dare I
it's,
say,
I think the defensive talent is here. Look on the line, right? Fadil Diggs was more than a productive player for Texas A&M.
oh
That was
wow.
a wonderful get for Syracuse. He is going to absolutely work magic. You're telling me you lose Stephen Thompson and you replace him with freaking Fidel Diggs? Yeah, you're gonna take that every single day of the week. Yeah, let him go to Nebraska. Who cares? Fidel Diggs is here and he's mean and he's ready to play. He's gonna set an edge. Uh, hopefully they don't drop into the coverage like DJ Durkin did 80 times. Like just put him a hand in the dirt or 2 feet up, whatever it is. Just have him get after the quarterback and set an edge in the run game. Fadil Diggs, phenomenal transfer. Isaiah Hastings, Braylon Ingram, Deion Wilson, Dennis Jacques. I'm not and then who's the kid that they lost to Wisconsin who I don't really care about? I don't think he's
Oh
all that good.
my God. Leon Lowry.
Was he that good guy?
Oh
I mean,
wait, no,
Syracuse fans are probably gonna say
yeah,
like, "Oh,
Leon
he was
Lowry.
kind of a big loss," but come on, guys. I think there's some optimism that this defensive line group could be better than last year's. Is that crazy, Christopher?
That's not at all. Not Tony White. I mean, obviously you missed him last year. You did. You did. That's all right. He's really, really good. He's really, really good. But again, I don't hate the combination of Robinson and Wright and Fran Brown too. I mean, that kind of gets overlooked sometimes when you're talking about, well, Elijah Robinson's never called plays and he's gonna be defensive coordinator. He's gonna be in over his head. Listen, he's not gonna be in over his head. I feel pretty confident saying that. And Fran Brown is right there guiding him all throughout this in-tier defensive line with Braylon Ingraham going out. To me, that concerns. With Deion Wilson coming back, Elijah Fuentes coming up, you're going to rely on those guys and Rashard Perry, Nwan Kacha, excuse me, I'm sorry, battling for these two deeps. Are they going to move guys, interior, right? Isaiah Hastings, can he play interior, especially maybe rushing the passer? We'll see, though. We'll see, but again, if there's a group that I feel good about this coaching staff coaching up, it's Elijah Robinson and that defensive line.
Oh yeah, and acquiring talent, dude, just nuts. Well, let's move over to the linebacker group. I mean, it's okay. I'm all right with this group. Marlo
Yeah, I mean,
Wax, this is a guy
he
that's
was
got plenty
solid.
of experience. I mean, I just feel like this isn't a high ceiling linebacker group. Am I wrong in saying that? I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong in saying that. I don't see it as necessarily a ridiculously high ceiling linebacker group, but I like Marlo Wax. I think he's a fine football player. I don't know. Are you the depth of this linebacker room? Does it concern you at all with how young it is?
You know what? I think they've been impressed with some guys stepping up in camp. And so you got some flexibility too there with guys like McDonald and Hurd being able to drop down on that defensive line and rush the passer, right? Which is awesome for you. You got Anwar Sparrow, a guy that's in there battling for two deep. You got Caden Brown, a guy that's impressing in camp as well. The Saint Jr.,
Caden
right?
Bailey, or are you talking about
Yep.
Jaden Brown?
Caden Brown, excuse me, impressing in camp there.
Caden Brown,
Lassane
or is
Jr.
it Caden Bailey, Jaden Brown?
Wow, did I mess that up? Excuse me. No, Caden Brown. Caden Brown from he's freshman, 6'4" linebacker from Queens. Yeah, it's Caden Brown. Yeah,
Oh, okay,
it's
okay.
Caden Brown. They like him uh behind the scenes, obviously. So we'll see. I mean, I think again, you mentioned the youth and the inexperience there in the depth. Yeah, but it's also a new staff. They're running that 4-2-5. So I guess, we'll see what happens. Obviously, we talked about the offensive line. You have some time to develop. Maybe Georgia Tech could expose you if you at your linebacking score. We saw what they did to Florida State, but you get your bye week 3, and then you get a chance to ramp up for your ACC competition, and that's not crazy at all. That's not crazy at all. That defensive back group. Listen, it's gonna be. Well, I see you kind of getting excited there. What's that reaction?
Well, what is Fran Brown? He's a DB's guy, and he's gonna acquire talent, right? And basically he put himself in a position where there are a ton of different pieces here for which he could use. Who's it going to be?
Yeah.
I don't know. So again, sorry, not again. I just mean like the reason why I'm excited is because it could be good. And I think they're working with a lot of different pieces, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good, right? And they got to still stay healthy, some of that upper echelon talent. But I think getting Deuce Chestnut back, I think he just fits better over here, right? I know he was
Well,
terrible for LSU, but like just
I think he's moving positions. I think he's coming back to safety. And by the way, Fran
yeah,
Brown, no connection to Deuce Chestnut, obviously the SEC, but not really he was not with the old regime at Syracuse. So inviting him back, and it could pay dividends, I think.
yeah. I just think he got a lot of experience here in some areas, and I'm okay with this group, man. I'm okay. Like maybe the superstar talent isn't completely there, all right. But this is a group that I trust Fran Brown to coach up. This is a group where you brought in a lot of different transfers. Yeah, it's going to be a question mark whether or not it's going to come together, but I feel a lot better. Like you have to feel better about this secondary than basically like if any other coach had been hired to Syracuse, like it feels like he did as good of a job as anyone could have done for the Syracuse secondary. So I think Syracuse fans should be very happy with this.
Yeah, I think I feel good about him being able to, almost moneyball it where he can just put guys in right positions enough to make plays. And then he can really start to get in talented guys like a guy like Marcus Washington, who he worked with at Georgia, who obviously, is at Louisville last year and unfortunately tore his bicep. He's out for the year. That stinks. That's a big blow, I think, for his development, but also for the depth and the upside in that room. But yeah, listen, I mean, you lose Isaiah Johnson, you lose Jason Simmons in that back end, but you still feel pretty good. You still feel pretty good. And again, you mentioned it. You talked Fran Brown, Fran Brown, Fran Brown. I mean, what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do well? And that's that secondary. And honestly, again, in the ACC, like there's a lot of, frisky quarterbacks, but again, consistently pushing the ball down the field. I'm looking at their schedule and I see either some transfers or I see some guys that I don't quite know if I trust them to do that yet, down in and down out.
We'll see. We'll see. But are you ready to talk about the schedule? Let's head over to the schedule. Look, you play Ohio week 1, okay, at home. Georgia Tech at home week 2, okay. Not guaranteed wins by any stretch of the imagination. Week 3, you get a bye. Stanford at home. Week 4, then Holy Cross at home. Then UNLV on the road. NC State on the road. You get a bye. You get Pitt on the road. Virginia Tech at home. Boston College on the road. Cal on the road. UConn at home. Miami at home. I every time I look at the schedule, I kind of see something different. Like a different stretch that I'm like, okay, that stretch is maybe a little bit harder than I thought. Like going to UNLV and then to NC State, kind of flip flopping across the country and having to go on the road both games. I don't think that's necessarily an easy stretch for a team like Syracuse. That Virginia Tech, Boston College, Cal, where you're playing 2 road games and having to fly across the country to Cal. I don't
Yeah.
think it's necessarily an easy stretch. So the over-under win total is 7. Okay. And look, I'm just doing the math here. I count 1, I count 2, I count 3, count maybe 4, 5, 6 probably. I don't know if I can get to 7, man. And and I think 7 and 5 is the most likely outcome, hence why the over and win total is at 7. If it's at 7.5, I'd probably like for sure take the under. But I think I'm still gonna take the under here, 7, and I'm not gonna feel great about it. I think that this team could win 8 games. I think it could win 9 games. I think with this schedule, this team could do a lot, and we feel good about some of these position groups. And this offense is going to look a lot different than last year, just being healthy and having like good quarterback play. Well, better quarterback play. And I guess we'll just see. I think the defense can be good. The talent is there. It's just a lot of question marks in terms of like maybe how it's going to come together, So even with the optimism at the quarterback position and the optimism with the defensive talent, I still think I'm going to pick the under here for Syracuse.
Yeah, I'm with you here too. It's a high number, and it's more so like the schedule might be an 8-win schedule for sure, but again, I don't quite know if Syracuse is an 8-win football team, and so I guess I hope to be proven wrong for sure, and I totally could be, and it's not crazy at all, and I don't think it's a crazy success. I don't think it's a crazy disappointment if they don't win 8 games in year 1 under Fran Brown. I think getting back to a bowl game is a good stepping stone to be able to build this program, continue to recruit well, develop, and obviously start changing the culture there to be a contender in the ACC year in and year out. Yeah, you said it though. Some of the road home dynamics is not ideal. You got to travel across the country twice. Twice. Brutal. Brutal. And obviously Miami at home to end it is not a fun game, especially with all the talent depth they have there and with those new transfers. They're gonna be clicking, I think, come end of November. Interesting to see that scheduling dynamic. I don't know who I would have expected Miami and Syracuse to play in rivalry week, but I guess it's kind of cool they're playing each other, what that's worth. But yeah, I'm with you on the under 7 wins.
But Syracuse as a program, I'm on the over. Fran Brown, we talked about in our Fran Brown video when they hired him, like that was like the only like true like A plus or A that like I gave out like in this offseason. There were 33 coaches that were hired this offseason. Like I thought he was probably one of, if not the best hires of this entire offseason. So I was taking the under this year is not reflective of how we feel about the Syracuse program in the future. I mean, this Syracuse program could potentially get back to what he was doing in the early 2000s. I feel like at times we've maybe been a little disrespectful to Tony Elliott and the Virginia Cavaliers. Look, I with Anthony Calandria being announced as starting quarterback, I think there's a frisky potential here. We have a list of quarterbacks, that are just on this, the fabled frisky meter, and I would say that Anthony Calandria is probably near the top. And in terms of him making things happen, but also making things unhappen in a negative way. But look, this Virginia defense was not very good last year. Their offense flashed at times in the passing game. I'd say their rushing attack was pretty abysmal. But I think this is a team that I think a lot of experts, beat writers, I think are decently high on, and I think maybe Tony Elliott is maybe he's working on something over here. Maybe he's working on something.
Yeah, I see it exactly. I mean, I was hoping Calandra was going to be able to beat out Tony Muskett, and nothing, no shame with Tony Muskett, very, very solid player, coming from the FCS. I think Monmouth a couple years ago, but didn't quite see it last year, and he didn't quite elevate this offense like a guy like Calandra can. I really think he put on more weight. It sounds like he's more comfortable. I remember he was a young kid last year. The coaches want him to be smarter with the football, and that might be the understatement of the world. He took 20 sacks in limited playing time, 9 interceptions. But again, he threw 13 in touchdowns. He broke records for um, Virginia football as freshmen. I mean, it was really fun. But here's where I want to see progress is rushing the football and helping him, giving him opportunities to just kind of feel good and work through it, not being third and long, and just kind of have consistency, being able to sustain drives because last year it was bad. It was really bad. Kobe Pace is back, who was not great last year, but again, he's back. Jack Grease is a guy that's really impressing the staff, I think, so far. He's got some versatility, especially for a young kid, and maybe being a bigger back. He can do a lot of fun things. Xavier Brown, is he healthy? He also brings versatility. I don't know if I love this group though. Still don't know if I love this group. This is where again it concerns me. But again, running back can be made look better if you have an offensive line. And I think the starting group, which we'll talk to eventually, is pretty solid. It's pretty
Yeah,
solid. But yeah, that running back room could be a concerning one, especially if you get into your depth.
yeah. It starts with Kobe Pace, who did he come from North Dakota State before Clemson? I'm pretty sure he came. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that, but regardless, he didn't do what you maybe thought he was going to do last year. In general, this rushing attack was just bad last year. It just was up and down, man. It was not good. It was not consistent. And behind Kobe Pace, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something, CD, but it just doesn't feel like there's a lot of talent, at least that I feel good about. I'm sure this coaching staff feels a little bit differently about it, but I'm not extremely sold on this running back room at all behind Kobe Pace.
Listen, on the contrary, I think that wide receiver group, even though you're replacing a guy who, again, the bowling ball himself is really, really talented. Malik Washington, he was a guy that obviously impressed everybody in the country, right? It's especially us here. And he's gone, right? Going to the NFL. I think he's with the Eagles now. I don't know exactly. But listen, Malachi Fields is back. He's a stud. I think he's really, really good. I took him in our fantasy draft because I feel so good about the potential of the number one wide receiver in Tony Elliott's offense, but also with the growth of this passing game that Calandra can bring and the potential, the big plays. I mean, he had 58 receptions and 800 yards, 5 touchdowns. I mean, what he can do, pushing the ball down the field. And then you also got Charles Harris, who I think from Kent State, that staff really likes. They seem to be high on him. Chris Tyree, former running back, converted slot receiver, highly rated recruit, coming from Notre Dame. Very, very solid get as well. And then you've got your returners, Andre Green, Sundarian Harrison, J.R. Wilson. These guys are going to be building depth. They're flashing, especially J.R. Wilson. Hopefully he gets back healthy. Hopefully he does. And then you also got, maybe a sixth, seventh guy like Cameron Courtney. Does he push his way on the field? Because he's been impressing, I think, in fall camp.
Yeah, and some continuity in that offensive staff as well. Let's talk about this offensive line group that I mean you're high on. I feel pretty good about these guys. I mean Brian Stevens, Blake Steen. I think across the board, I think you have guys that have had snaps and could be pretty decent. But are they going to be able to run the ball with this offensive line is the question because they need to. they need to find a way to run the ball and take the ball out of the hands of Anthony Calandria in crucial situations. Now there are situations where you're playing maybe teams that are more talented than you that you're going to rely on Calandria to make those special throws that he sometimes makes. Emphasis on sometimes, but yeah, can you see a situation where this offensive line is able to get a push and maybe they're able to run the ball with Kobe Pace a little bit?
It starts with a guy like Brian Stevens. That's a very good football player. Coming over last year, I mean, he was super solid for you. But to me, I'm looking at his running mates. And Noah Josie, does he improve? And Ty Furnish, they're excited for him. Even though he struggled last year, he put on weight. He's been better this offseason. He's expected to play guard for him. How much does that actually come to fruition? I mean, obviously it's a lot of talk behind the scenes, but we'll see. And I think those two guys, because you kind of know what you're getting in Mikhail Boley and Blakesty, just replacement level tackles will do their job for sure. Maybe even a little bit better this year, hopefully with some development. But yeah, to me, I'm looking at the interior guys. Can you get a push in that running group, running game surrounding Brian Stevens at center?
And can the tackles improve, right? That's that's what you need to see. That's what you need to see. Now you mentioned that they might not have the depth on this offensive line. Like if they have some injuries here, like how much of a concern is it if guys like Jimmy Priest and Dawson Alters and Houston Curry end up having to find themselves onto the field?
I think it depends where. I think Stevens is a guy that's not irreplaceable, but he is damn near close. Listen, I think they've got guys. First of all, to answer your question, I think it would be concerning. I think they've got guys that they want to develop for 2025 and beyond. I'm looking at a guy like Cole Serber and Grant Ellinger. Those are young kids that are just developing, getting better and better, in this offseason. But they'd love to be able to redshirt Ellinger and kind of wait to develop Serber. So we'll see. Again, offensive line, you see attrition, you see rotation a lot. But again, we kind of saw it with the slow pace of play in week 0. Now we'll see if it continues as a trend all throughout college football. But you could see less and less snaps, but you don't have to rotate a ton of offensive linemen. So you could have fresh bodies there, all 5 starters, and be able to grow and build continuity throughout the game and also throughout the season.
Now, if you want to look at attrition and the schedule dynamics, feels like some of those tougher games might be in the middle to late part of the season. So could be an interesting get off for this Virginia team if you're looking at trying to stay healthy, not playing those super physical, tough football teams. In so overall, this offense, right? I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but for some reason, I feel better about it than I did last season. And last
Calandria,
season,
man. It's Calandria.
yeah, Calandria, I guess, and and last season going into season, I, famously said that Malik Washington was a pretty unimpressive transfer get. That was a hot take, but let's over to the defensive side of the football, where I mean, you were terrible last year, um, particularly in that run defense. Points per game allowed, you allowed 35 and a half points per game almost. Actually, more than that, 35.6 points per game, which was good for 121st in the country. You led about 427 yards per game, 6.1 yards per play, 167 rushing yards per game, 5.2 rushing yards per attempt. Uh, yeah, this was not a very good defense last year, and which is part of the reason I'm sure why Calandria was forced to make some of the plays that he did, and who knows, he might have to still make those plays. Did we get better on the defensive side of the football? Where are you
Listen,
feeling about this front seven?
I hope so. I think the return of Cam Butler. I mean, he was a guy at 3.5 sacks in about 4 games last year. He was pretty good, low key, really good. I think that'll be a nice step in the right direction. I still think you're a little bit thin at your edge group there. Obviously, Chico Bennett's going to be the running mate of Cam Butler, but then you got Ben Smiley and Terrell Jones. I bring up that depth because a guy like Mekhi Buchanan, he was going to be a guy like you rely upon for some depth. He had 20 tackles a year ago. He has a hip injury. He's out for the year. Is Jewett Hayes ready? I know Virginia fans, I know Virginia staff, they really like him as a freshman coming in there with a ACC body to play. We'll see, man. I mean, again, you do not like to relying upon a freshman in the trenches there, but again, I think he's just kind of flashing where he's just too good to keep off the field. And I think he'll play, and I think he could do some fun things. Interiors where I see a little bit of concern. So obviously Famui is gone. That's 600 plus snaps gone for you. But again, you struggle stopping the run. So it's not like it's a huge loss to me, but it's like, who you bring in? Who's got depth? Like, what's really going on there? Jameer Carter, Michael Diata, Jason Hammond's going to step up a little bit more. Again, they didn't address it, which I don't know if that's just lack of ability to, because listen, every college in the country wants interior guys defensively from the portal. There's few and hard to come by. So we'll see what happens there. Hopefully the development year over year continues to get better and better with Tony Elliott. I think this is what, year 3 now for you with Virginia. So you'd like to see improvement, but interior could be concerning at the top end. Exterior with that edge group, you could have some depth issues.
At linebacker, I think a lot of us can agree that James Jackson wasn't necessarily fantastic last year with a 20% missed tackle rate. It's got a lot of snaps though. That's a plus in that linebacker room. You got 3 guys. Cam Robinson's got some snaps. Dorian Jones got some snaps. I like Cam Robinson. I think he's a really good football player. Beyond that, to me, it's a lot of known, or at least I don't know a lot about these guys. I don't know. I'm pretty iffy on this room. I'm not really moved by it, if that makes any sense.
No, I think it's a solid group. It's not going to be a group I think that like gives you high upside, has real big time playmakers. But again, I mean, unfortunately, Stevie Bracey's out for the year. That's tough on depth because then you got guys like Dorian Jones who are impressing but need to be ready to play. Trey McDonald, who's again impressing but has to be ready for play. And you throw in a guy like Landon Dyneley too, also battling for reps there. James Jackson's also been in and out of the lineup, I think, this fall camp. We'll see if he returns. Is he healthy? Obviously, you mentioned, him not being an elite player for you last year necessarily, or a very good player, but like you mentioned the snaps. It'd be nice to have, first of all, he'd be able to practice and develop, but secondly, to just have a leader in there, a veteran more so. Cam Robinson was, I thought, okay as a freshman. And I think you're hoping on some development there. If you're looking at upside, you're probably looking at him and what he can do, continuing to get better and better. But yeah, I'm with you here. Nothing special about this group. Just stay healthy. Be a solid group. Be in the right spots when you're supposed to be, and don't have the bottom fall out. And the problem is you're stopping the run. You got to stop the run. And if you don't have elite defensive linemen or good defensive linemen in front of you, you could struggle. And it's not even a fault of your own. It's just going to be constantly dealing with shedding blocks and having to fill huge holes that could potentially be, carved out by the offensive line against your defensive line. But listen, that DBs, you know what? Dare I say you lose a lot, but I think the staff feels pretty good. I mean, you hit on a couple transfers, which if you're going
You
to, and
think?
DB is probably the place. Yeah, okay, I guess you think. So Kendrick Smith come from UPenn, as well as Jam Jackson from Robert Morris. Kendrick Smith more so than the others, shining in camp. Probably going to start there. You also got Kempton Shine coming from Eastern Michigan, looking good, has a ton of experience there. How about Malcolm Green, who's played a lot, was a nickel as well. So again, you got pieces, you've got whatnot. So your cornerback room, there's experience there, there's veterans. You're trying to replace Cohen King and Sam Westfall, but not like those guys were world beaters anyways. I think it's pretty replaceable for sure.
Yeah, I still a little skeptical of this room for sure. I mean, it was a room that was. I don't think it was the weakness of this team last year at all. I would say it was their front seven that was pretty not great. And also the secondary didn't benefit from the defensive line either because look, they were 132nd in the country in sacks per game. On
Yeah.
average, they only had 1 sack per game on the dot. So Yeah, it doesn't get it done for you necessarily. And that if they can't get to the quarterback again this season, it could be difficult for this. It could be another tough time for this secondary. But again, I don't think it was necessarily the complete weakness of this team or this defense last year. So yeah, I mean, I like some of these guys, and I like what I'm reading about these guys, but sometimes it's really easy to drink that Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you're getting a lot of players from lower level, and I think corner is a tougher position, to move up from levels from. I don't know. I mean, I get what you're saying. There are pieces here, and you like what you're reading about. There's great reports, so I'm gonna slightly buy into the reports and say that this secondary could possibly actually improve potentially from last season, but I'm not gonna make that claim like it's going to happen. So I'm just gonna be cautiously optimistic about it and leave it at that. The schedule though,
Wait,
look, I'm
real
gonna
quick, I will make a claim here about the safety group. I do think this is probably the strength of your defense. And Jonas Sanker and Corey Thomas coming back. Antonio Clary's another veteran there playing a spur role. You got Caleb Hardy. To me, I like the depth here. Caleb Hardy. How about some young guys? KK Adams, Ethan Minter, right? Guys who have been impressing, having a damn good fall camp. Almost too talented to leave off the field. And even though you're losing, oh, I'm sorry, Jonas Sanker, is he back? I,
I'm pretty sure he is.
yeah, yeah, that's what I thought too. But you lose a guy like a Caleb Hardy and Dave Harrod. You know what? Again, I think you can replace those guys in the aggregate and maybe even be better this year.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not ready to make that claim yet, but I'm optimistic that it can happen. When I look at the schedule, I mean, I'm okay with it, right? You don't draw your Florida State, you don't draw your Miami. Um, those tougher games in the conference, you get on the road, and some of those games are more winnable. I think you get at home, so I think that benefits you. When you're trying to hit the over 4.5. Maybe not when you're trying to compete for the ACC championship, but look, you get Richmond at home, Wake Forest on the road week 2. I think you can win that game, and I think they will. Maryland at home could actually be an interesting game. I like Maryland's. I like their defense specifically. We'll see. Coastal Carolina on the road week 4. You get a bye week. Then you kind of get 2 games where back-to-back home games. Boston College, Louisville. I think that's going to be sort of the heart of your schedule this season. Like if you can manage to win one or both of those games, I think it could turn out to be a better season than this win total will have you think. Clemson on the road week 8, UNC at home week 9, which by the way I think they can win that game. Bye week, then you get Pitt on the road, which I think they can win that game. Notre Dame on the road, SMU at home, which I think they can win that game. Virginia Tech on the road to finish the season. Give me the over 4.5. I'll take it. I think this team can get the 5 wins. I think this team might be able to get to a bowl game, but they have, if they want to get to 5 wins, I think they can get to without necessarily running the ball super effectively. But if they want to make a bowl game, they have to find a way to run the ball, and they need better linebacker play, and they need to find a way to get to the quarterback. But I think their schedule is like a bowl game worthy schedule for most teams. So I think Virginia can get to 5 wins. So I'll say it. And I don't know if you're going to be on that with me. It sounds like you're actually more optimistic than Virginia. Are you
Yeah,
going
I'm on the over too.
Okay,
Listen,
good.
the only thing that concerns me is you've got a couple of tough road games, right? Wake Forest, Coastal Carolina, and Pittsburgh in terms of tough road games. I'm talking about winnable football games that
But
you
there's some
want to be
other ones that
competing
are
in.
winnable football games that are at home though.
Yeah, exactly. That's where you get your
Like
Boston
like I
College
like the
and
fact that your Notre
SMU
Dame,
and
your Virginia Tech.
UNC.
I like the fact that your Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, and Clemson are all on the road because you weren't going to win those games anyways.
Yes, that's exactly. And you also get SMU and UNC back at home. So we'll see. I think I feel really good about 4 wins on the schedule, and then it's just one or two more coming over from some of those winnable games at home. It's kind of gonna be what it's gonna be about. And listen, if it's a toss up and Calandra's got the football, who knows, man? Who knows?
let's head over to Blacksburg, Virginia, where Virginia Tech is sitting on an over-under win total of 8.5. What would you tell fans last year? That's what if they knew that this win total was going to be at 8.5 the next season. I mean, look, you were going into the season with a win total like 4.5, and you were knocking on the doorstep of an ACC championship appearance in November. Just a fantastic job by Brent Pry over there. Just an unbelievable job. I'm very high on the talent of this team. I think the schedule is favorable. Let's get into it. On the offensive side of the ball, Tyler Bowen, I think, did a fantastic job adjusting when they took out Grant Wells and put in Karen Drones. He was very, very, very effective running that offense. It was a huge, huge swing when they switched him in that Purdue game. Um, yeah, if he goes down, I think it's a big problem, right? I think Virginia Tech's
Well, okay, in terms
okay
of their upside.
in
In
terms of
terms of
the
their upside.
upside. Yes. Now, do we know who the backup quarterback is for Virginia Tech and that he plays a pretty similar style to Kyron Jones, and that's probably the reason why they went and got him in the portal? Yeah. Yeah. Christopher, would you like to tell people who the backup quarterback for Virginia Tech is?
Colin, excuse my language, motherfucking Schlee. We love Colin Salinger. So I was a guy that was hoping he would win that job over UCLA last year. And damn it, maybe he should have. Okay, I'll say that.
I don't
I
know.
like Garbers, but he was not very good at UCLA. But listen, I love him as a backup. I think it does a ton of things for what they can do in terms of establishing identity and understanding who you are and your weaknesses and potential reasons why you do not maximize your potential, and backup quarterback was one of them. And listen, I like Pop Watson. I know you do too, Virginia Tech fans. He's kind of banged up a little bit. I see the potential there, right? I do. But listen, in terms of 2024, where you are looking at an ACC title game potential, Colin Schlee is that guy for you to be your backup. And you pair him, well, okay, you pair drones, who, listen, I want to see some improvement, consistently pushing the football down the field, you know, work in the middle, work in the intermediate and deep passings because he took care of the football last year. I mean, only 3 interceptions. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're telling me you're going to rush for 800 yards and only have 3 interceptions, I love that. I love that. But I do want to see a little bit more progression, and I think we will year over year. Listen, he didn't even win the job last year. He finally got the reps this all off season, spring, summer, and able to, kind of build momentum. And he pairs with a really good running back who I think the Tootin, right? Tootin coming back 5.0 yards per carry, 863 yards, 10 touchdowns. Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty effective backfield, I would say. And the receiver room, I think Virginia Tech has lacked in that department the last few years, but I don't necessarily think that is the case this year. I think that this coaching staff and these beat writers, from what I've read, right, I think they like the wide receivers that they have. I think they have three that they can say that they really like. I think Allie Jennings, he was hurt all last year, okay, but he proved that he was effective in his short stint. The other top two receivers, last year, Lane and Felton combined for 14 touchdowns. Those without Jennings, and I think they had an evolving offense down the stretch, and also you look at the tight end, uh, Nick Gallo also went down last year, and he's back in that tight end room. I think he got a room full of pass catchers in Felton, Lane, Jennings, and then just to throw it off, getting Nick Gallo back, I think is kind of a big deal in that tight end room. Sneakily, sneakily.
I really want to see those 3 receivers especially stay healthy because I think Jennings, listen, it might be just reading into some Kool-Aid, right? But I think he could be real difference maker for the development of drones. I talked about it wanting, to push the ball down the field. He is a playmaker. 6'2", 205. I mean, great compliment from Felton, who's 6'5", 216. Holy cow. And then Lane, kind of working your slot and short to intermediate routes. I think Jennings, what he can do and open up a third dimension of that offense in terms of an option for drones to deal with. I mean, Bowen, hey, he's got a good opportunity here to make a name for himself, especially again this year with those receivers, with the development of drones, and what they can do offensively. And a lot of that has to do with your offensive line. And again, Virginia Tech's part of the reason why so many people are so high on them is returning production stat is super high. It is one of the best in the country. And that also rings true at your offensive line. Bob Schick is gone. You insert a guy like Laith Gahanan. I mean, he's obviously potential, the tools, athleticism, all that good stuff. You could see some growing pains early in the season for sure. But again, you kind of have some time to kink it out until week 4 and week 5, and then you can really kind of get into it. And obviously, more and more the law firm there in the interior. I mean, are they going to play center, right guard? Are they going to flip? Whatever it may be. I love it. But Caden Moore is a captain for you, 6'3", 310. Xavier Chaplin, 6'7", 323, 800 plus snaps. Really, really solid.
He's finally got a
And then
full
how,
season under his belt too, which
yeah,
is so. And then also
incredible.
you bring Cunningham from Georgia State. Who knows? Is he going to play? Is he going to play guard? Is he going to play tackle? I mean, Parker Clements played tackle for them last year, I believe, and he was their
Yeah,
highest
800
graded starter on
snaps.
PFF, but in pass protection. But running the ball, I think Tuden only averaged 2.7 yards per carry when they ran behind Clements. So I think they have enough pieces here where they can figure something out. They can
Yeah.
figure something out.
Well, Brody Matthews comes back to 400 plus snaps. I mean,
Brody
listen, that's
Meadows.
Meadows. I'm sorry. You got 7 guys, and listen, that's it's about as good as you can ask for in college football these days.
Yeah, seriously. So, the defensive side of the ball, we got Chris Marv dialing in plays over there as your defensive coordinator. Look, I think this defensive line could potentially be pretty nuclear if Aeneas Peebles lives up to the expectations, right? Obviously, he has to replace Fladarius Payne, but I think Aeneas Peebles could be really good. I think he's so good. Getting him over there from Duke when Mike Elko left was just an absolute blessing. Blessing. He's so good.
You pair him with Kamari Copeland, and I think internally, the JUCO kid, they feel really good about his talent, his upside, playing next to, learning from a guy like Aeneas Pebbles or Peebles. I mean, yeah, and you pair him with Josh Fuga. And then you're gonna have to have some there's transfers that are coming in Kevin Gilliam and Curtis Perry to develop and give them depth, be ready to play come September. But damn it, man, that interior group went from an absolute weakness, a glaring hole. You bring in 4 guys that, I mean, well done. We talked about identifying needs, identifying spots, and then having the ability to go out and land quality players at those positions. Hats off. Hats off to the staff. Moving over to the edge group,
Oh,
Powell Ryland is a real good player. 9.5 sacks for you. Excuse me. Cole Nelson, Captain Cole Nelson for you. 4.5 sacks last year. CJ McCray and Keyshawn Burgos, good depth there for you as well. Again, like this is a good group. Again, defensive line, you want to talk about like being able to separate yourself at the top half of the ACC. I look around the ACC and I see some questionable offensive lines at times. You can really insert your will, impose your will with this defensive line to pair with some talent, in the back 7. Holy cow.
yeah. To add on to the Powell Ryland hype train, 48 pressures is borderline elite. All right. Like that is a spectacular number of pressures to have. 14 and a half tackles for loss. I mean, just yeah, you talked about it a lot. And then the linebackers thing going to benefit. I mean, Kelly Lawson was an all ACC honorable mention linebacker. I think he's good. Sam Brumfield from Middle Tennessee State. He's played a lot of snaps. I,
Dude,
I,
they love him,
I
man.
think
They
they like him.
fucking love him.
I'm a wait and see for him, but if he hits, man, like that front 7 is so good. That front 7 is so good if Sam Brumfield hits.
Okay,
So
here's what I'll say. So Brumfield is awesome. Brumfield and Lawson. Brumfield is 5'11", but he is a brick shit house. 5'11", 225, and he's built like an act just a, and so but Lawson is 6'6", 225. How many linebackers can move like that at 6'6"?
Jack
The
Campbell.
different I know, and look what he did. Holy cow. And Lawson, what he can do, step out and play nickel for you, the athleticism to do that, he can be a playmaker along field, like a guy who Sam Brunfield, like named captain as a transfer, right? Like they love him this camp. The coaches like him, leader of that defense. He's very, very smart and instinctive. That's really, really fun. Really, really fun because the different things you can do. And I think it's just gonna be awesome. Seeing 5'11, 5'10, Sam Brunfield, who's absolutely yoked and probably gonna make massive plays for them next to Kelly Lawson and just the different things you can do. And god damn it, man. Kelly Lawson's a fun player. Really fun player. Unfortunately, he was hurt, right, with that quad injury this spring. So you would have loved to see him develop, right, in that spring. But again, it sounds like he is gonna be a guy for them. Potentially can be a huge playmaker.
And then the secondary, you have one of the stronger cornerback pairs in the ACC in Mansour Delane and Dorian Strong. I mean, they were very effective last year, particularly Dorian Strong, of course, who only gave up a passer rating of 11.8. Yeah, 11.8, 3 interceptions, 7 pass breakups. He's nuts. Where I think Mansour Delane kind of does his damage, he's more of a physical guy. I think he can step up and make plays in the run game. But and then you get some other guys back in that safety group and that nickel. I mean, this defense has a chance to be really good. I think Chris Marv, um, and Brent Pryor just gotta be really happy with the talent that they have on this team. I really hope that. Well, you're staring at a guy who's a ticket for Virginia Tech plus 2,000 to win the ACC back when we were talking about it in like May or April, whatever. So yeah, I hope this defense is as good as we think it's going to be because the explosiveness on offense, particularly in that run game, you have a chance to shorten some games. If you have a really nice passing attack, and if your defense just can keep the other team off the field, and your run game just keeps the time of possession margin, I think is going to be significant. I think you're going to see Virginia Tech holding on to the ball a lot and just grounding and pounding some teams out. I see this Virginia Tech team as a massive problem for other teams in the ACC, and their schedule is I would call it rather favorable. So I'm in love. I'm in love with this Virginia Tech team. So I guess we haven't finished talking about the secondary completely. Any other notes on the secondary before we talk about their schedule?
I just love what they have done to cross train athletes, to cross train these players to be able to play nickel, outside corner, safety, back down to corner. And what you can do is really incredible. And Brent Pry, obviously defensive guy himself, Chris Marv, their chemistry, their relationship goes all the way back to Vanderbilt, back in the early 2010s when Marv was a stud linebacker for them. And I think that relationship continuing to build, continuing to be able to just kind of come up with these crazy schemes and be able, not schemes, but disguises and coverages and flexibility to keep guys healthy and fresh and offenses guessing, especially when you have that headset for a guy like Sam Brunfield to have. I mean, it's going to be really exciting. It's going to be hard to keep track on Virginia Tech defensively, what they're doing in that back four there, back five. But yeah, I mean, Strong, Delane, holy cow, you got depth with love it. Williams is cross training, Braylon Johnson's cross training, Christian Williams cross training. I mean, holy cow, Jalen Jones cross. I mean, I just absolutely love it. Not to mention 6'3", 212. Kenyatta Jenkins is also pretty awesome as well. So yeah, to me, this is the defensive interior is more projection. To me, this is a known commodity that I feel really good. And I don't think that's a surprise to just about anybody.
Their schedule: week 1 at Vandy, week 2 home against Marshall, week 3 at Old Dominion, well, which has been scary in the past, but they stink this
Mhm.
year. Rutgers, week 4 at home. I feel pretty good about them going 4-0 there. I think Rutgers could maybe have its way with them in certain ways, but I feel pretty good about 4 wins there. Miami on the road, week 5 is a loss. Stanford on the road, week 6 is kind of scary because you're traveling across the country. Then you get a bye before you get Boston College at home, Georgia Tech at home, Syracuse on the road, Clemson at home. Circle that one on your calendar, folks, because I think that could be a huge problem game for Clemson. Then you get a bye before you play Duke and Virginia. When I think about teams that I want to play in the ACC, who do I want to draw? I want to draw Duke. I want to draw Virginia. I want to draw Stanford. Not to mention you're out of conference being 4 games where you should be 4-0, and you will be favored in all of them. I think that they can win that Clemson game. I really do because it's at home. I think by that point they might only be a one-loss team headed into that game and control their own destiny to make it to the ACC championship. So I am all over this over 8.5 on the win total. I got it when it's at plus 146. You know what it's at right now, CD? And I think when we recorded the show a while back, it's at like minus. It's like
Yeah, I
minus
got it pulled up
130,
here.
minus 105, minus 115. Like that's where you're getting it. Minus 128. We
Ugh,
got it at we got it at plus 146, CD. That's ridiculous value right there. Love
big
that.
time value. I'm also on the over too for all the reasons you described. All the reasons we went over all throughout talking about this team. Yeah, the schedule is a fun one because yeah, you get to November and if you that Clemson game, man, you said it. We'll be previewing that for sure. For sure. Here's what I'll say too. In Rutgers, yes, that's going to be a game that, listen, if you lose that game, I don't think it's the worst thing. I think it's a nice wake up call for sure. And I think it's also not going to, and it's not an ACC game either. So it doesn't really affect your standing there. At Miami week 5 is really interesting because Miami's talented and they got a good offensive line. They got a good defensive line. And they're kind of got similar strengths as you do, but also, and as also a dynamic quarterback as well. So we'll see. We will see. But Virginia Tech, a lot of reason to be optimistic about them. And again, exciting. College football is better when Virginia Tech is better. And I'm excited for Brent Pry to continue to build a really good program fundamentally for this Hokies staff.
I think Dave Clawson has some issues.
Oh,
I
it's
bringing in Hank. I thought Mitch Griffiths was going to be good last year, man. It
I
hurt a
did too.
lot when Donovan Green went down, man. Like in that fall camp after that spring game he had, he's so talented, but he's back. But you also lose Jamal Banks in the receiver room. Bringing in Hank Bachmeier, man. I don't even think he's won the job. Has he even won the job yet? I don't even know. I don't even know. My
So he's
anticipation.
battling Michael Kern, right?
Yeah.
Oh fuck man. I listen, I just want I know Kern was not great last year, but Bachmeier, I do not think is the answer. I don't.
No, I think like it is crazy that you got rid of Mitch Griffiths, and I think that I don't know. I'm not gonna call it downgrade. I don't think Hank Bachmeier is very good at all. I really don't. And
No.
when I look at this offense, I see some I see some low key superstar type talent at these skill positions. I want to head over to the running back room. Demond Claiborne is a very, very good running back. I love Claiborne. I think he's a really good football player. And I think Wake Forest has had some really good running backs these last couple of years. They do a good job breeding those guys. You know, is Tate Carney going to kind of take up that role of being like that guy that also steps up as well in that running back room? Is Ty Clark as a true freshman? Is he ready to go? I don't know. Beyond that, I don't know. But hopefully Demond Claiborne stays healthy because I think he is really, really, really good.
Yeah, I think the more carries for him, the better. We'll see. We will see a lot. Also, like sometimes the running game, it just relies on that old line too. Like you almost, it's not that it's totally dependent on it, but sometimes you do see good running backs struggle because their old line just cannot give you any help or their passing game, and people are just stacking the box on you. Yeah, listen, I'm with you. I like Claiborne. Questions about depth with Carney, but we'll see. We'll see. I think. Listen, moving on to the wide receiver room. Let's just say everyone stays healthy, and don't worry, I just knocked on wood for you, Wake Forest fans. Could be a strength for you. I think it absolutely could be a strength for you, even losing, the kid over
Jamal Banks to Nebraska.
Jamal Banks over to Nebraska. Thank you. Donovan Green, he's supposed to be healthy by week 1. That's the expectation. Sounds like he wasn't practicing a ton in the early to middle of fall camp, and that's okay. I mean, he doesn't have to practice. He can just show up and be really, really good for you. And week 1, it's North Carolina A&T, and Not to take any opponent lightly, but again, you should be able to win that game with an 80, 85% Donovan Green. Behind him, Taylor Morin, a good football player. Good football player. 600 yards last year. Behind those guys, this is where you want to see some development because they've had time because Green has been hurt, right? You've had chances to develop Horiado Fields, right? Impressing. Deuce Alexander, the staff likes. Walker Merrill is back from injury. Micah Mays, another guy that the staff likes too. That's 6 guys that you feel good about. And here's my question though: is who's throwing them the football? Can they take advantage? Do they even matter? If you have big time separation, large catch radiuses, like guys that can just make plays where it's like it doesn't matter who's throwing the football, they're just going to look good back there anyways. That would be awesome. And I think that's if you're talking about Wake Forest making a bowl game, that's what you're talking about. Is you're talking about this wide receiver group elevating that quarterback room.
Yeah, which it's not always easy, but they do have that kind of talent in there. This offensive line, in some spots, I don't know. I kind of like it. Are you in that
Go
boat?
for it. All right, well, let's hear it.
Okay, well, Petitbon, Petitbon.
Yeah,
Gosh, wish I
the
could pronounce
center.
that name. Goldman, Gordon. I think those guys are very solid over there on that offensive line. I don't necessarily know how all of these pieces are going to match necessarily, but you got a lot of guys. Look, redshirt senior, redshirt junior, redshirt junior, redshirt junior, redshirt junior. In your depth, you're looking at redshirt junior, more redshirt juniors. So the more age, the more experience you have on this offensive line. I'm looking at guys with maybe Nick Sharp if he's going to be the guy that plays guard there. I don't know. Does he have a ton of experience? Does Russell have? I mean, they've minimal, right? But I look at Gordon, I look at Goldman, and I look at Petitbon. Gosh, I hope I know how to say that. I hope I'm saying that right, guys. Sorry,
Yeah,
Wake
Luke
Forest fan.
Petitbon. I think that's right.
Maybe, maybe it's hard to look up the pronunciations of like every single player we talk about because we talk about so many. It's like,
Well, and like when you're reading things too, it's like, oh, like you read it and like, oh, I know how to say that. Yeah, that's
yeah,
good. And then
yeah,
all of a sudden you go, and it's like hour 3 right now
it comes
recording, and
out because.
it's
By the way, I think
1 in the
it's
morning
Horatio Fields. You said
or audio. God,
I think it's Horatio. But you know
sorry.
what? We're fine. We're okay. We're
I'm
doing our
bad at it.
best out here. And
Listen, we feel good about this. I mean, I think there's some questions, but I can see the optimism with guys like Sell and Russell having good camps, the staff liking them, and then even the depth piece like Uber Ajango, like a guy that's had a good camp as well. Reason for optimism is a good thing on the offensive line. Not everybody has that. And Wake Forest has plenty of problems, but this is not one. I don't think in terms of things to be really focused on in week 1. But let's talk about another strength, I think. How about this defensive line? You returned just about everybody on the edge. Jacine Davis had 46 pressures last year, seven and a
yeah,
half sacks.
yeah,
Good football player. Good football player. Now, is there going to be production and growth and improvement and stepping up from everyone else in that room? We'll see because I think if you can meet Davis just a little bit, give him a little bit more help, and I think what he can do is really turn a good defensive group, especially rushing the passer.
yeah. I'm really excited about that. In that, I'm excited by that group in particular. Sorry, words, right? The linebacker group. I think it's okay. Depth. Are we worried about the depth a little bit? Maybe
So
not.
obviously Hazen comes back, right? He's a good player, 86 tackles last year, but I mean Branson Combs, he's gonna have to play. I think they like him. I think that's okay if he's gonna play too. We got Quincy Bryant and Chase Jones in there as well. What do
I
you
mean,
think?
it's not always easy replacing, almost 650 snaps, Jacob Roberts, but
Jacob Roberts gone.
I don't know. I
To
mean, with a good
yeah.
defensive line, you don't necessarily have to have elite linebacker play to benefit from that.
To me, I look at this front seven, I think can be a strength of your defense because that back four, those DBs, I worry, man. I do worry, and we'll get to them in a second here. It's going to be stopping the run and putting those guys in good situations where you can blitz and get after the quarterback so they don't have to cover all day long, or they don't have to cover and covering 3rd and 4, like that's really hard to do because you got to play up, right? You got to play heels on that 3rd down line. Like it's not easy to do that, and you can get susceptible to be beat deep, to be burned, and whatever else. Sometimes you get blitzing a lot of guys, and you have like quick decisions the quarterback can make and just get the ball out, and you beat one guy and it's a touchdown. But it's going to be about continuing to stop the run with this front seven.
Yeah, third downs were an issue last year. 105th in the country in third down conversion rate for that defense. A problem getting off the field, man. And look, and your run defense was okay last year. I thought, maybe not like spectacular, but it was fine. It was a strength of your defense, but so teams only ran the ball 55% of the time, which seems like to y'all just sitting out there, that seems like a normal number, but that was like 104th in the country. Like people didn't really run the ball on Wake Forest because they knew that they could just sling the pill a little bit. Passing yards per attempt, they were 114th in the country, the secondary, and I think they're gonna have to get to the quarterback. And that's something they did a good job, not necessarily finishing those sacks, being that they only average like 1.7 sacks per game, but I think there's opportunities for this team to improve in that area and getting actually to the quarterback and bringing him down. I think it would alleviate a lot for that secondary. But like you said, definitely a lot of room for, I don't want to say disaster, but the secondary might not be that good.
Listen, you struggled last year stopping the pass with Kalen Carson, with Deshaun Jones and Malik Mustafa, all of which are gone. A couple of those are going to be playing good players in the NFL, and then obviously Deshaun Jones going to be playing meaningful snaps for Alabama down there. Listen, you got some optimism, I think, with some guys stepping up. I'm looking at Jamari Glasgow, Trevon West. They've had good offseason, but again, are they going to be Carson and Jones? Kadarius Kelly, is he going to be healthy? And obviously, you got Slocum and Blue. Blue's experienced guy. DeMarcus Rankin as well in that group. I, I don't see an alpha, right? I don't see an elite, on even above average type play. And if you can get replacement level play there, I think that's probably a win this year. Unfortunately for Wake Forest, is that crazy?
No, it's an issue. And some of these games that are like really winnable on their schedule, like I look at going across the country and playing Stanford, that's a winnable game. But they're going to be chucking the ball around the yard. Like that
Yeah.
is a game I'm super concerned about if I'm Wake Forest, especially if you're trying to hit that win total of 5, right? I look at Cal, who's at times, at times, they feel a lot better about their receiver room. Like, yeah, maybe they could throw the ball. I got 2 quarterbacks there. Don't know who's going to be the guy this year, but I mean, Ole Miss, Virginia, if Calandria gets frisky, NC State in a new offense, or not new offense, but with the quarterback that can maybe push the ball down the field. Yeah, I'm worried about this Wake Forest team, man. And overall, right? We talked about the front seven being a strength of the entire team. Maybe the wide receivers, right? Demont Claiborne being a really solid player, but when I look at the schedule, and I play North Carolina A&T to start the season, Virginia at home, Ole Miss at home. Those are your first 3 weeks. Then you get a bye. You play Louisiana Lafayette at home, right? And then all of a sudden, you just kind of rip off like 3 of your next 4 games are road games. And at this point, you haven't played a road game yet, So you get a wake up call week 6 heading into NC State, Clemson at home, then UConn on the road.
Which is,
I
by the way,
I
awesome.
I anticipate
Awesome.
awesome. I anticipate them winning that game, but then you go to Stanford, man. I keep looking at the game and like, if you're gonna hit over 5, you have to win that game. And I don't know, man. The bye comes week 10, and then Cal at home, UNC on the road, Miami on the road, and then Duke at home, which I think they can actually win that game for sure. Yeah, I don't see a bowl game here, man. I just do not see it. I think that sure the offensive line is good. I think they might be able to run the ball, but I also think they play some pretty good defensive lines. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
uh I'm very
We pick it
skeptical of
at
this Wake
five.
Forest team.
Are
No,
we picking
it's
at
tough.
five?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. there's 4.5 on FanDuel. The over is juiced to -152, but if you look at the fives out there, the over
It's
is juiced
close
to
to
like
100.
it's like -110. So
Yeah, that's much closer number. Or in terms of even odds on both sides. Yeah, I like 5. Yeah, I'm gonna go under for Wake Forest. Reasons why they would hit the over though would be, I guess, Hank Bachmeier or Michael Kerr step up and be better than I think they would be, right? Or better than they've been in camp. But you mentioned Claiborne, Donovan Green. You have your stars on your offense take over football games, and then that front seven and that especially that pass rush really can finally get after the quarterback and make plays, cause turnovers, et cetera, et cetera. That's where you can steal a game or not get caught lacking on the road.
yeah, that's the formula right there. And Dave Clawson has done some stuff like that in the past, and it's never necessarily a good idea to bet against Dave Clawson, but in this scenario, I was pretty close to actually like taking Wake Forest's under, on our picks list, but I couldn't get myself to do it. Couldn't get myself to do it, but we'll see. We'll see. Thank you all very much for joining us for our ACC preview part 2. That is the last of the preview episodes. Thank the Lord. Jeez, we put in so many hours for this. So look, if you're still listening, first of all, unreal, by the way. Props to you. But we would really appreciate a like and a subscribe from you guys because hundreds of hours have gone into these videos. And I know not everyone likes every single one. And some of y'all really liked a lot of them and appreciated them. And we appreciate that support. Just please give us a like, if you will. And we're going to be around here for the season. Check out our preview episode for week 1. Thought we did a really good job breaking down some of those games as well. And some bets as well, some potential underdogs, some big spread underdogs. So I really grateful to be doing this right now. And this summer, we saw a lot of growth on this channel, and thanks to y'all. So appreciate y'all. CD, anything on the way out?
57 Power 4 teams, I believe, is what we did. It was a heck of a ride. Glad to do it because I know a lot more about every team, I think, going into the season. Excited to see what happens. Obviously, the ACC fans could be a fun year and hopefully a multi-bid league. And obviously, the future of the ACC is unknown and you can't control that, but we can control how much fun we have watching, following along this year. Obviously, like Matthew always says, like and subscribe and do all that good stuff, share, because we are going to be covering the ACC and every other conference throughout college football and hopefully giving you guys the best content we can give you. Thank you so much.
I think it might have been more than 57. I think it might have been 68. See, 17 plus
Oh,
18 plus
I
16,
forgot. I forgot the one. I forgot to carry the one. What am I doing? I was
60,
at
67, 68.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
67. No Notre Dame. Sorry, Notre Dame fans.
Join a conference. Join a conference.
Joining. But yeah, we'll see y'all in the next one.